Longshot by Dick Francis, read by Kenneth Branagh. The letter from Ronnie Curzon came on a particularly cold morning when there was ice like a half-descended curtain over the inside of my friend's aunt's attic window. "Dear John," the letter said, "care to drop into the office? There's been a suggestion about American rights in your book. Yours ever, Ronnie. P.S. Why can't you have a telephone like everyone else?" I walked as usual from the friend's aunt's house in Chiswick to Ronnie's office, 4 miles away in Kensington High Street. "He's with another client," Daisy said. Big white teeth in a black face, a neat Oxford accent, going to night school for Italian classes. "I'll let him know you're here," she said, lifting her telephone, pressing a button and consulting with her boss. Ronnie's door opened and out came his head, his neck and a section of shoulder. "John, come along in." I went down to his room, which contained his desk, his swivelling armchair, 2 guest chairs, 1 occupied, a cupboard, and roughly 1,000 books. "Sorry to keep you," he said. He was short, with smooth dark hair and soft dry hands, wearing always a business suit over a white shirt and a striped tie. Authors, his presentation seemed to say, could turn up in pale blue and red ski suits and moon boots, but serious business took place in sober worsted. "A cold day," he said. "The slush in the gutters has frozen solid." He nodded, only half listening, his eyes on his other client, who had remained settled in his chair. "Tmaine," he said, "this is John Kendall, a brilliant young author." Tmaine, 60-ish, grey-haired, big and self-assured, was clearly not pleased at the interruption. "We haven't finished our business," he said ungraciously. "Tmaine Vickers," Ronnie said to me, completing the introduction. Tmaine Vickers eyed me closely. "How much do you know about racing?" he demanded. "Horse racing?" I asked. "Well, of course horse racing." "Well," I said, "not a lot." "Tmaine," Ronnie protested, "John isn't your sort of writer." "A writer's a writer." To me he said, "What have you written then?" 6 travel guides and a novel." "Travel guides? What sort of travel guides?" "How to live in the jungle, or in the Arctic, or in deserts, that sort of thing." "For people who like difficult holidays," Ronnie said, with all the indulgent irony of those devoted to comfort. John used to work for a travel agency which specializes in sending the intrepid out to be stretched. I said, "What is it that you want written?" "An account of my life." I blinked. "After all," he said, "I've trained getting on for 1,000 winners, the Grand National, 2 champion hurdles, a Gold Cup, the Whitbread, you name it. I've seen half a century of racing. There's stories in all of it. Childhood, growing up, success. My life has been interesting, damn it." It was almost as if he needed the book to be written to prove he had lived. "How old are you?" he said abruptly. 32. "Could you write a biography?" "I don't know. I've never tried." Tmaine finally left, and Ronnie said to me, "Sorry to have kept you all this time." "Tmaine asked me if I'd ever written a biography," I said. Ronnie gave me a swift glance. "My advice to you would be to forget it." "Will you find him someone?" I asked. Not on the terms he's offering." Ronnie considered things. "He wants a writer to stay in his house for at least a month, to go through all his cuttings and records and interview him in depth. Then he wants 70% of royalty income, which isn't going to amount to much in any case. No writer's going to work for 30%. That's starvation." Ronnie smiled. "About these American rights." It seemed that a New York literary agent, an occasional associate of Ronnie's, had shown interest in my novel. Would I, Ronnie asked, care to have him send a copy of my manuscript to the American agent who would then, if he thought the book saleable in the American market, try to find it an American publisher? I'd be delighted," I said. "Thought you would. Not promising anything, you realize. He's just taking a look." "Yes." I walked back to Chiswick. I opened the front door with my latchkey and met the friend's aunt in the hall. "Hello, dear," she said. "Everything all right?" I told her about Ronnie sending my book to America, and her thin face filled with genuine pleasure. She was divorced, a grandmother, sweet, fair-haired, undemanding. She seemed to regard me as a sort of extension nephew. We had lived for 10 months in harmony, our lives adjacent but uninvolved. "It's very cold. Are you warm enough up there?" she asked kindly. "Yes, thank you," I said. I went upstairs thinking that I'd lived in the Arctic Circle, and if I hadn't been able to deal with a cold London attic, I would have been ashamed of myself. I wore silk jersey long-sleeved vests and long johns under sweaters and jeans under the ski suit, and I slept warmly in a sleeping bag designed for the North Pole. That night the air temperature over London plummeted still further, and in the morning Auntie's house was frozen solid. "There's no water," she said. "The central heating stopped and all the pipes are frozen. I've called the plumber. He can't do anything until it thaws." She looked at me helplessly. "I'm very sorry, dear, but I'm going to stay in a hotel until this is over. I'm going to close the house. Can you find somewhere else for a week or two?" I helped her close all the stopcocks, and in return she let me use her telephone to look for another roof. I phoned Ronnie Curzon and put it to him straight. "Can you sell me to that racehorse trainer?" "What?" "He was offering free board and lodging." "Take me through it, one step at a time." I took him through it. "Tell him I can start at once." "You're mad. And I can ride. Tell him that." When I phoned again at noon, he was mournfully triumphant. "Tmaine agreed. He quite took to you yesterday, it seems. He's agreed to a writing fee." Ronnie mentioned a sum which would keep me eating through the summer. "He's agreed you should have 40% of any royalties, not 30. He's agreed to pay your expenses. He was pleased you can ride. He says you should take riding clothes with you and also a dinner jacket." "When does he expect me?" I asked. "As soon as you can. Today, even," he said. "Will you go today?" "Yes," I said. I was met outside the Reading bus station by a young woman in a padded coat and woolen hat, who checked me over from boots 6 feet up via a ski suit to dark hair, and came to the conclusion that I was the writer. "You're the writer?" "John Kendall," I said, nodding. "I'm Mackie Vickers. That's M-A-C-K-I-E, she spelled, not Maggie. Your bus is late." "The roads are bad," I said apologetically. She led the way to a chunky jeep-like vehicle parked not far away and opened the rear door. "Put your bags in here. You can meet everyone as we go along." I stowed my belongings and climbed in, sharing the back seat with 2 dimly seen figures who moved up to give me room. Mackie Vickers positioned herself behind the wheel. "His name is John Kendall," Mackie said to the world in general. There wasn't much reaction to the introduction. "You're sitting next to Tmaine's head lad," she went on, "and his wife is beside him." The shadowy man next to me said, "Bob Watson." His wife said nothing. "In front," Mackie said, "next to me are Fiona and Harry Goodhaven." Neither Fiona nor Harry said anything. Mackie drove, concentrating on the slush-lined surface under the yellowish lights of the main road west out of Reading. Eventually she said to me, turning her head over her shoulder, "We're not good company. We've spent all day in court. Temper's afraid. You'll just have to put up with it." Mackie turned from the Great West Road onto the M4 motorway and made better time westwards between snow-covered wooded hills. We reached the Cheveley interchange and left the motorway to turn north on the A34 to Oxford. After about 7 miles, Shackleton showed up on a signpost to our right. Mackie slowed, signalled, and cautiously turned off the main road into a very narrow secondary road that was little more than a lane, where snow had been roughly pushed to the sides but still lay in shallow, frozen brown ruts over much of the surface. The engine, engaged in low gear, whined laboriously up a shallow incline. I was hoping that we would reach the top of the slope without sliding backwards, and we did, only to see that the downside looked just as hazardous, if not more so. Mackie wiped the windscreen and with extra care took a curve to the right. Then it happened. Caught by the headlights, stock still in the middle of the lane, stood a horse. A dark horse buckled into a dark rug, its head raised in alarm. "Hell!" Mackie exclaimed and slammed her foot on the brake. The vehicle slid inexorably on the ice. The horse, terrified, tried to plunge out of the lane onto the field alongside. Intent on missing him, and at the same time fighting the skid, Mackie miscalculated the curve, the camber, and the speed. The jeep slid to the side of the lane, spun its wheels on the snow-covered grass verge, mounted it, ran along, and tipped over sideways into a drainage ditch, cracking with noises like pistol shots through a covering sheet of ice. The near side wheels, both front and back, finished 4 feet lower than road level, the far side of the ditch supporting the length of the roof of the vehicle so that it lay not absolutely flat on its side. I was opening my door, which was half-sloping skywards, and hauling myself out more or less before the engine had had time to stall. The downland wind, always on the move, stung my face sharply with a freezing warning. Bob Watson had fallen on top of his wife. I reached down into the car and grasped him. He tried to free himself from my hands, crying, "Ingrid, she's in water!" "Come out," I said peremptorily. "Then we can both pull her. Come out, you're heavy on her. You'll never get her out like that." Some vestige of sense got through to him. I held him and he held her, and between the two of us we brought her out onto the roadway. The ditch was full of muddy, freezing water under its coating of ice. Even as we lifted Ingrid out, the water deepened fast in the vehicle, and in the front seat Fiona was yelling to Harry to get her out, and Harry was underneath her and in danger of drowning. The one headlight which had still been shining suddenly went out. Mackie hadn't moved to save herself. I pulled open her door and found her semi-conscious, held in her place by her seatbelt. I felt round her until I found the seatbelt clasp, released it, hauled her out bodily and shoved her into Bob Watson's arms. "Sit her on the verge," I said. "Clear the snow off the grass. Hold her. Shield her from the wind." Bob helped her to sit down. She began moving and moaning and asking what had happened. No blood, I thought. Lucky. My eyes became accustomed to the dark. Fiona put her arms up to mine and came out easily into the air, lithe and athletic. I let go of her and leaned in for Harry, who now had his seatbelt unfastened and his head above water. He helped himself climb out and went dripping over to Mackie. Ingrid stood in the road, soaked, thin, frightened. The wind was piercing, relentless, infinitely dangerous. I said to Bob Watson, "Take all your wife's clothes off." "What?" "Start at the top," I said. "Take everything off and put my ski jacket on her. Quickly, it's warm." I unzipped it and took it off. The cold bit through my sweater and undershirt as if they were invisible. I was grateful to be dry. "I'll help Ingrid," Fiona said, as Bob still hesitated. While the two women unbuttoned and tugged, I went to the rear of the overturned vehicle and found to my relief that the luggage door would still open. I fished out my 2 bags and Harry watched the water drip off them. "Well, everything will be wet," he said. "No. Waterproof, sandproof, bug-proof were the rules I travelled by, even in rural England." "Which would you prefer?" I asked Harry. "Bathrobe or dinner jacket?" He actually laughed. "Strip off," I said, "in case the Iceman cometh. Top half first." Harry began to struggle out of his sodden overcoat, business suit, shirt and tie, wincing with pain as the cold hit his wet flesh. I handed him a navy blue silk undershirt and long johns, 2 sweaters, grey trousers and the bathrobe. No one ever dived into clothes faster. "My shoes were a size too big," he complained. Fiona had changed Ingrid to the waist and was waiting to do the second half. I took off my boots and then my ski pants. I kept my long johns, and Fiona put them on Ingrid. The boots looked enormous once they were on, and Ingrid was 9 inches shorter than my ski suit. "My feet are squelching," Fiona said, "and I'm wet to the neck. Is there anything left?" I dug into the bag again for jodhpurs, black socks and a sweatshirt. "These any good to you?" I asked. She took all the clothes gratefully and hid behind Ingrid to change. I put on my black shoes, jeans and a dinner jacket. A lot better than nothing. Fiona still had too few layers, even if now dry. The only useful thing still unused in my belongings was the plastic bag which had contained my dinner jacket. I put it over Fiona's head. At least it stopped the wind a bit and kept some body heat in. Harry and I sat the semi-conscious Mackie on our linked wrists and draped her arms round our necks, and we set off towards the village with Bob Watson carrying all the wet clothes in one of my bags, Fiona carrying dry things in the other, and Ingrid shuffling along in front in the moon boots, lighting the way with the dynamo torch from my basic travel kit. "Doesn't any traffic ever come along this road?" I asked, when we'd gone half a mile. "There are 2 other ways into Shackleton," Harry said. "God, this wind's the devil. My ears are dropping off." "Oh, it's not far now," Bob said. "Once we're round the bend, you'll see the village." He was right. Electricity twinkled not far below us, offering shelter and warmth. Mackie suddenly awoke to full consciousness on the last stretch and began demanding to know what was happening. "We skidded into a ditch," Harry said succinctly. "The horse! Is the horse all right? Why are you carrying me? Put me down!" We stopped and set her on her feet, where she swayed and put a hand to the side of her head. "Did we hit the horse?" she said. "No," Harry answered. Mackie refused to let us lift her up again, so we began to struggle on towards the village. One reason for the dearth of traffic became clear as we reached the first houses. 2 cars lay impacted across the width of the lane. "You'd better all come to our house," Fiona said as we edged round the wrecks. "It's nearest." No one argued. We turned into a long village street. Presently Ingrid with the torch turned into a driveway which wound round behind some cottages and opened into a snowy expanse in front of a big Georgian-looking house. Fiona led the way round to a side door, which she unlocked with a key retrieved from under a stone. The warmth of the kitchen we filed into was a positive, life-giving luxury, and there, in the lights, I saw my companions clearly for the first time. "God," Fiona said, "that was hell." She was older than I'd thought. 40s, not 30s. "Take this damn thing off me," she said. Harry obligingly pulled the cleanest plastic bag up and over her head, taking her knitted hat with it, freeing heavy silver-blonde hair. She stared at me across her kitchen, looking with curiosity, seeing, I supposed, a tallish, thinnish, youngish, brown-eyed person in jeans and a dinner jacket. She went over to the huge red Argo which warmed the whole place, lifting the lid, letting volumes of heat flow out. "Hot drinks," she said decisively. "Harry, fill the kettle and get some mugs." Harry, my height but fair and blue-eyed, complied as though thoroughly accustomed to being bidden. The kitchen was large, and the manner of its owners had the unself-conscious assurance of social status. Mackie sat down uncertainly at the big central table, her fingers gingerly feeling her temple. She huddled into her fawn-coloured padded coat. All I could see were reddish curls over her forehead, closed eyes, pale lips, and the rigid muscles of distress. "Is Perkin home?" Fiona asked her. "He should be." Fiona went across to a wall telephone and pressed buttons. Perkin, whoever he was, apparently answered, and was given a variety of bad news. Harry poured steaming water onto instant coffee in a row of mugs. Bob Watson took off his cap and looked suddenly younger, a short, stocky man with wiry brown hair and rounded cheeks. His wife Ingrid, swamped in the ski suit, looked out at the world from a thinly pretty face and sniffed at regular intervals. Standing with his backside propped against the Arga, Harry warmed both hands round his mug and looked at me. "Welcome to Berkshire," he said. "Thanks a lot." Slammed doors and approaching footsteps announced the arrival of Tmaine Vickers. "Got yourselves into a load of shit, have you?" he boomed. "Roads too much for you, eh?" The man who followed Tmaine through the door looked like a smudged carbon copy, same height, same build, same features, but none of Tremaine's bullishness. If that was Perkin, I thought, he must be Tremaine's son. The carbon copy said to Mackie crossly, "Well, why didn't you go round the long way? You ought to have more sense than to take that shortcut." Tremaine's gaze fastened on me. So you got here. Good. This is my son, Perkin. You've already met his wife, Mackie." He stared at me. "Why on earth are you wearing a dinner jacket?" "We got wet in the ditch," Harry said briefly. "Your friend, the writer, lent us dry clothes. He issued his dinner jacket to himself. Didn't trust me with it, smart fellow. I've got on his bathrobe. Ingrid has his ski suit. Fiona is his from head to foot." "Well," said Tmaine, "the sooner we get home, the better. Come along, Bob." "Yes, sir." Bob Watson, I remembered, was Tremaine's head lad. He and his Ingrid went over to the door, followed by Mackie and Perkin. I put down my mug, thanking Harry for the reviver. I picked up my dry clothes bag and followed Tmaine and the others out again into the snow. The six of us squeezed into a large Volvo. At the end of the village, Tmaine stopped to let Bob and Ingrid get out. They turned away to walk through a garden gate towards a small, shadowy house, and Tmaine started off again toward open country, grousing that the trial would take his head lad away for yet another day. After about a mile of cautious crawling, he turned in through a pair of imposing gateposts and stopped outside a very large house where many lights showed dimly through curtains. We went into a warm hall. Tmaine walked through a doorway to the left, looking back for me to follow, which I did. Mackie and Perkin went on down the hall. "Make yourself at home," Tmaine said. "This is the family room where you'll find newspapers, telephone, drinks, things like that. Help yourself to whatever you want while you're here." The big room looked comfortable in a sprawling way, not tidy, not planned. There was a mixture of patterns and colours, and a glowing log fire in a wide stone fireplace. "Perkin and Mackie have their own part of the house, but this room is where we all meet," he said. "If you want to leave a message for anybody, pin it to that board over there." He pointed to a chair on which was propped a corkboard. Red drawing pins were stuck into it at random, one of them anchoring a note which in large letters announced briefly, "Back for grub." "That's my other son," Tmaine said. "He's 15. I expect you'll soon get the hang of the household." Mrs. Vickers," I said tentatively.
Mackie?"
"No, Your wife?"
"Oh, I see. No, my wife took a hike. Can't say I minded. There's just me and Gareth, the boy. I have a daughter, married a frog, lives outside Paris, has 3 children. She's the eldest, then Perkin. Gareth came later."
Mackie came into the room, carrying an ice bucket. She took the ice over to a table bearing a tray of bottles and glasses, and began mixing a drink. She was wearing a blue jersey dress over knee-high, narrow black boots. Her red-brown hair, cut short, curled neatly on a well-shaped head, and she was still pale. The drink she mixed was gin and tonic, which she gave to Tmaine. He nodded his thanks. "For you," Mackie said to me. "John?" "The coffee was fine," I said. Perkin appeared, carrying an already full glass of brown liquid that looked like Coca-Cola. He sank into one of the armchairs.
"Sit down, John,"
Tmaine said, waving to an armchair. I sat as instructed.
"What happened in court?" he asked Mackie.
"It was awful," she shuddered. "Nolan looked so vulnerable. The jury think he's guilty, I'm sure they do, and Harry wouldn't swear after all that Lewis was drunk." She closed her eyes and sighed deeply.
Tmaine glanced at me and asked Mackie, "You told John what's going on?"
She shook her head, and he enlightened me a little.
"We gave a party here last year in April to celebrate winning the Grand National with Topspin Lob. There were a lot of people here, including Fiona and Harry. I trained horses for them. And Fiona's cousins were here, Nolan and Lewis Everard. They're brothers. No one knows for sure what happened, but at the end of the party, when most people had gone home, a girl died. Nolan swears it was an accident. Lewis was there. He should have been able to settle it one way or the other, but he says he was drunk and can't remember."
"Is Nolan being tried for murder?" I asked.
"For assault resulting in death," Tmaine said. "It happened in Mackie and Perkin's sitting room. Mackie and Harry walked in and found Nolan standing over the girl who was lying on the floor. Lewis was sitting in an armchair. Nolan said he'd put his hands round the girl's neck to give her a shaking, and she just went limp and fell down. And when Mackie and Harry tried to revive her, they found she was dead."
"The pathologist said in court today that she died from strangulation," Mackie said, "but that sometimes it takes very little pressure to kill someone. The pathologist said it's always dangerous to clasp people suddenly round the neck, even in fun. But there's no doubt Nolan was furious with Olympia, that's the girl, and he had been furious all the evening, and the prosecution produced someone who'd heard him say, 'I'll strangle the bitch.'" She broke off and sighed again. "The pathologist's original report said it could so easily have been an accident that there wasn't going to be a prosecution. But Olympia's father insisted on bringing a private case against Nolan. He won't let up. He's obsessed."
"If he'd had his way," Tmaine confirmed, "Nolan would have been behind bars all this time, not out on bail." "In the morning," Tmaine said to me, apparently tired of the trial and its tribulations, "I thought you might come out with me to see my string at morning exercise."
"Oh, I'd like to," I said.
He turned his head to Mackie. "I suppose you won't be out for first lot?"
"No, sorry. We'll have to leave early again to get to Reading."
He nodded, and to me he said, "Mackie is my assistant."
I glanced at Mackie and then at Perkin.
"That's right," Tmaine said, reading my thought.
"Perkin doesn't work for me, Mackie does."
"Perkin never wanted to be a trainer, and he has his own life. But when Perkin married Mackie, he brought me a damn smart assistant, and it's worked out very well."
Mackie looked pleased, and it seemed the arrangement was to Perkin's liking also. Gareth blew in with a gust of cold air, and stripping off an eye-dazzling psychedelic padded jacket, asked his father, "What shall we have for supper?"
"Anything you like," Tmaine said.
"Pizza, then." His gaze stopped on me. "Hello, I'm Gareth." Tmaine told him my name and that I would be writing the biography and staying in the house. "Do you want some pizza?" the boy said.
"Yes, please."
10 minutes, he said. He turned to Mackie. "Do you two want some?" Mackie and Perkin shook their heads and murmured that they'd be off to their own quarters. Gareth was perhaps 5'6", with a strong echo of his father's self-confidence, and a voice still half-broken, coming out hoarse and uneven. "Have you remembered to send my school fees?" he asked. Tmaine clearly hadn't. "If you'll just sign the cheque," his son said, "I'll give it to them myself. They're getting a bit fussed."
"The chequebook's in the office," Tmaine said.
"Right." Gareth went out of the door and almost immediately returned. I suppose there isn't the faintest chance, he said to me, that you can cook.
In the morning I went downstairs to find the family room dark, but lights on in the kitchen. On a chair I found my boots, gloves, and ski suit. I put on the suit and boots, and Tmaine, in a padded jacket, cloth cap, and yellow scarf, came in blowing on his bare hands. "Ah, there you are," he said, puffing. "Good. Bob Watson brought up your clothes when he came to feed. Ready?" I nodded. "It's as cold as ever I've known it. Racing's frozen off, but we still have to exercise the horses. We won't stay out long. The wind's terrible." As we went through the hall, I asked him about the feeding. "Bob Watson comes at 6, he said briefly. "All horses in training get an early morning feed. High protein. Keeps them warm. Gives them energy." As we stepped out into the open, the wind pulled his last words away and sucked the breath out of our lungs. I reckoned we were still dealing with perhaps 10 degrees of frost, plus chill factor. A short walk took us straight into the stable yard. Bob Watson came to meet us, noticing I wore the ski suit, acknowledging my thanks. "All ready, Governor," he said to Tmaine. "Good. Bring them out, Bob. Then you'd better be off if you're going to Reading." From many open doors came figures leading horses, riders in hard helmets, horses in rugs, with plumes of steam swirling as they breathed. Bob moved through the scene, giving a leg up to each lad, and they resolved themselves into a line, perhaps 20 of them, and processed away through a far exit, horses stalking on long, strong legs, riders hunched on top. "As the jeep's in the ditch, we'll have to go up to the gallops on the tractor. All right with you?" "Sure," I said. The horses had merely to cross a public road to be on a downland track, and the road surface itself had been thinly covered with unidentified muck to make the icy crossing easier. Tmaine waited until his whole string was safely over before following. Then they peeled off to the right, while we lumbered onwards and upwards over frozen, rutted mud, making for a horizon that slowly defined itself as the firmament grew lighter. Today, he said, they would be doing half-speed gallops on the all-weather track, and he led the way on foot from the tractor across a stretch of powdery snow to a low mound from where we could see a long, dark ribbon of ground winding away down the hill and curving out of sight at the bottom. "They'll come up here towards us," he said. "The all-weather surface is wood chips. Am I telling you what you already know?" "No," I said. "Tell me everything." He raised a pair of binoculars. I looked where he was looking, but it took me much longer to spot the 3 dark shapes moving over the dark track. Once they drew near and past us, their speed was vivid, stirring, a matter of muscles stretching and hooves thudding urgently on the quiet surface. 2 or 3 at a time, they all came up in their turn. Then they went back down and did it again. After that, the horses set off to walk home, cooling down in the process, and we rode the tractor back to the yard and returned to the house and the warmth of the kitchen. "Coffee?" Tmaine said, going towards the Aga. "You won't mind getting your own breakfast, will you? Look around. Take anything you want." I made the coffee and toast. He went out into the hall. "Dee," he shouted. "Coffee?" Presently in the doorway appeared a slight brown-haired woman who wore jeans and a huge grey sweater reaching to her knees. "Dee," Tmaine said round a mouthful of toast. "This is John Kendall, my writer." To me he added, "Dee's my secretary." I stood up politely, and she told me unsmilingly to sit down. She went across to the Aga to make her own coffee. Tmaine watched me watching her and smiled. "You'll get used to Dee," he said. "I couldn't manage without her." She took the compliment without acknowledgement and sat half on a chair as if temporarily, as if about to retreat. Tmaine ate his toast, issuing a stream of instructions which Dee seemed to have no trouble remembering. When the spate slowed, she stood, picked up her mug, and said she would finish her coffee in the office. "Utterly reliable," Tmaine remarked to her departing back. "There's always 10 damn trainers trying to poach her." He lowered his voice. "A shit of an amateur jockey treated her like muck. She's not over it yet. If you find her crying, that's it." We went out into the hall, and he pointed to the doorway opposite. "That's the family room, as you know, next to the kitchen." He walked along and opened a closed door. "Is my dining room. You can work in here." A spacious room with mahogany furniture, swagged crimson curtains, formal cream and gold striped walls, and a plain dark green carpet. "That'll be great," I said. "Good." He closed the door again and looked up the stairs we had climbed to bed the night before. "We put those stairs in when we divided the house. This passage beside them leads to Perkin and Mackie's half. He veered through another doorway, and I followed him into a big room in which Dee looked lost behind a vast desk. Tmaine said, "I'll leave you to Dee. See you later." I looked round the office. Bookshelves, filing cabinets, copier, fax, computer, telephones, floor safe, television, tapes. I ended the visual tour where I'd begun, on Dee's face. She was about 40, I supposed, thin but not emaciated, good skin, bobbed straight hair, unremarkable features, strong hands. "How long have you worked here?" I asked. 8 years about. "What I chiefly need," I said, "are cuttings books." "They're not in books, they're in boxes." She turned her head. "In that cupboard over there. Help yourself." I went across and opened a white-painted door, and inside found stacked on shelves from floor to head height a whole array of uniform white cardboard boxes, all with dates written on their ends. "Can I take them all into the dining room?" "Be my guest." I arranged the boxes chronologically and took the lid off the first, realizing from the date on its end that it had to go back beyond Tmaine. Tattered yellow pieces of newsprint informed me that Mr. Loxley Vickers of Shellton House, Berkshire, had bought Triple Subject, a 6-year-old gelding, for the record sum for a steeplechaser of 1,200 guineas. Tmaine's father, I presumed. Tmaine returned in due course. I heard him talking forcefully into an office telephone, and presently he strode into the dining room to tell me that the stray horse we had encountered on the road the previous night had been caught and was none the worse for its traumatic experiences. "How are you doing?" he went on. "Reading about your father." "A lunatic," I laughed. "What about your mother?" "I hardly knew her. I was only 10 when she died. Same age as Gareth when his mother hopped it. You might say I know what it's like to be Gareth. Except his mother's still alive, and he sees her sometimes." After a moment's thought, he added, "I sometimes wonder whether living with me is a proper upbringing for the boy." "He strikes me as very well adjusted," I said. "Thanks." "Tell me about Perkin," I suggested. "Perkin? Huh." He smiled. "Perkin is a genius. Lives in a world of his own." "What does he do?" I asked. Tmaine looked as if his elder son's motivations were a mystery, but I also sensed a great deal of pride. "He makes furniture," he said. "Designs it, makes it himself piece by piece. Chests, tables, screens, anything. 200 years from now they will be valuable antiques. Apparently he's top class. A genius." At about 6:30 that day I walked down to Shellton to collect my clothes from the Goodhavens, Fiona and Harry. I had by that time taped 3 hours' worth of Tmaine's childhood and walked round with him to inspect his horses at evening stables. "I'll cook when I get back," I said. "You don't have to," he protested. "Don't let Gareth talk you into it." I'd discovered that the younger son rode his bicycle each morning to the house of his friend Coconut, from where both of them were driven to and from school. Gareth was never home much before 7, often later. His notice, "back for grub," seemed to be a fixture. I reached the main street of Shellton and tramped along to the Goodhavens house, passing 3 or 4 cars in their driveway and walking round to the kitchen door to ring the bell. After an interval, the door was opened by Harry. "Oh, hello, come in. Forgot about you. Fact is, we've had another lousy day in Reading." I stepped into the house and he closed the door behind us. "Let me tell you first," he said. "Nolan and Lewis are both here. Nolan got convicted of manslaughter. 6 months jail, suspended for 2 years. "I don't need to stay," I said. "Do me a favour. Dilute the atmosphere." He walked me through into a pink and green sitting room. Fiona, turning her silver-blonde head, said, "Oh, good heavens, I'd forgotten." She came over holding out a hand, which I shook. "These are my cousins," she said. "Nolan and Lewis Everard." She gave me a wide, don't-say-anything stare. "A friend of Tmaine's," she said to them briefly. "John Kendall." Mackie, sitting in an armchair, waggled acknowledging fingers. Harry pressed a whisky into my hand. The brothers were both short, Nolan handsome and hard, Lewis swollen and soft. Late 30s, both of them. Dark hair, dark eyes, dark jaws. Nolan's first sentence was that he wasn't in the mood for guests. His aristocratic-sounding language was 50% obscenity. Harry said calmly, "John is writing Tmaine's biography. He knows about the trial and the top-spin lob party. He's a friend of ours, and he stays."
Everybody knows, Mackie said. It was in all the papers this morning.
Harry nodded. To be continued in Reel 2.
It's not an expletive joke, Lewis said. His peevish voice was like his brother's, though a shade higher in pitch, and as I progressively discovered, instead of obscenities, he had a habit of using euphemisms like expletive, bleep, and deleted. I had read 2 accounts of the previous day's proceedings, one in a racing paper, another in a tabloid. I had learnt a few facts left out by Vickers' family the evening before. Fiona's cousin Nolan, for starters, was an amateur jockey, well known in both papers, who often rode Fiona's horses, trained by Tmaine Vickers. Nolan Everard had once been briefly engaged to Mackie. A demure photograph of Olympia showed a fair-haired girl, young, immature, with an air of innocence. No one seemed to have explained why Nolan had said he would strangle the bitch. The question really is, Fiona was saying, not whether the Jockey Club will warn him off racecourses altogether, but whether they'll stop him riding as an amateur.
Harry said to Nolan, "It's rather put paid to your ambitions to be made a member of the Jockey Club, though, hasn't it, old lad?"
Nolan remarked that Harry hadn't helped the case by not swearing to hell and back that Lewis had been comprehensively pissed. Harry didn't reply except to shrug gently and refill Lewis's glass. Even if one made every possible allowance for Nolan, I thought he was still unattractive, viciously unattractive. "I still think you ought to appeal," Lewis said. Nolan's pornographic reply was to the effect that his lawyer had advised him not to push his luck. "Bleep the lawyer," Lewis said. "Appeal courts can increase sentences," Fiona said warningly. Lewis said, "If Nolan doesn't appeal, it's as good as admitting he's expletive guilty as charged." There was a sharp silence all round. They all did think him guilty, though maybe to different degrees. "Don't push your luck" seemed good advice. Fiona said to me, "Stay to dinner?" and Harry said, "Do," but I shook my head. "I promised to cook for Gareth and Tmaine." "Good God," Harry said. Mackie said, "Did you come in Tremaine's car?" "No, walked." "Oh, then, do you want a lift home?" Harry came to see us off. "Here are your clothes and your bag," he said, handing it to me. "Can't thank you enough, you know." "Any time." "God forbid." "He's not always like that," Mackie said as she steered out of the drive. "Nolan, I mean." "I read in the paper today that you were once engaged to him." She half laughed. "Yes, I was. For about 3 months, 5 years ago." "What happened?" "I realised it was a mistake. I'd just said one day, 'It won't work, will it?' And he said no, so we fell into each other's arms and had a few tears, and I gave him his ring back." "You were lucky," I commented. "You're so right." She turned into Tremaine's drive and came to a halt. "We've been fairly good friends ever since, but Perkin has always been uncomfortable with him." She sighed, unbuckled her seatbelt and stood up out of the car. "Perkin does tend to be jealous." "I'll ignore you," I promised. She smiled vividly. "I'm going in through our own entrance," she said. "Okay." She nodded and walked off, and I went round and into Tremaine's side of the house. In the family room he had lit the log fire and poured his gin and tonic. He listened to the outcome of Nolan's trial. "Guilty but unpunished," he observed. "New-fangled escape clause. Help yourself to a drink." Gareth came home with his usual air of a life lived on the run, and eyed me with disapproval as I sat in an armchair drinking wine. "I thought you said—" he began. "I will," I said. "Oh, really? Now?" "Of course," I said, cheerfully getting up. I glanced at Tmaine. "All right with you?" "You're all right with me until further notice," he said. "You're home and dry with Dad," Gareth told me, steering me through the kitchen. He pointed me ahead to a heavy-looking door furnished with business-like bolts. We went through. There were 2 freezers, both upright. "This one," Gareth said, opening the door, "is what Dad calls the pizza freezer." "Or the pizza freezer," I suggested. "Yes, that too." It was stacked with pizzas and nothing else, though only half full. The other proved to contain 4 packs of beef sandwiches, 50 to a pack. There were also about 10 sliced loaves, 1 large turkey, pints of chocolate ripple ice cream, and a lot of bags of ice cubes. "What are you going to make?" Gareth asked. I hadn't the faintest idea. But what Tmaine, Gareth and I ate not very much later was a hot pie made of beef extracted from 20 defrosted sandwiches and chopped small, then mixed with a tin of mushroom soup, a find, and topped with an inch-thick layer of sandwich breadcrumbs fried crisp. Gareth watched the simple cooking, and I found myself telling him about the techniques I'd been taught for living off the countryside without benefit of shops. "How do you know about these things?" I told him about the 6 travel guides. Tmaine enjoyed the pie, which 3 healthy appetites polished off to the last fried crumb. "I got promoted to resident chef. Tomorrow I could do the shopping," Tmaine said. He pulled out his wallet and gave me enough to feed the 3 of us for a month, though he said it was for a week. Gareth told his father that worms were rich in protein and asked me if I had any of the travel guides with me. No, sorry, I didn't think of bringing them." "Well, couldn't we get some?" "I could ask the travel company to send a set," I suggested. "Yes, do that," Tmaine said, "and I'll pay for them. We'd all like to look at them, I expect." "But, Dad," Gareth protested. "All right," Tmaine said. "Get 2 sets." In the morning, after I'd driven Tmaine on the tractor up to the downs to see the horses exercise, and after orange juice, coffee and toast, I phoned my friend in the travel agency and asked him to organise the books. He said he would send them by train if I liked. Tmaine told me to get them sent to Didcot Station, where I could pick them up when I went in to do the shopping. When Tmaine had gone out again with his second lot of horses, I returned to the boxes of clippings in the dining room. I decided to reverse yesterday's order and start at the most recent clippings and work backwards. The previous year had been a good one for Tmaine, embracing not only his Grand National with top spin lob, but many other successes. Also in this box were clippings dealing with the death of Olympia. I read a whole batch of accounts of that death from a good many papers. In total, they told me not much more than I already knew, except that Olympia was twice described as a jockette. It appeared that she had ridden in several ladies' races at point-to-point meetings. Olympia the jockette had been 23, had come from a secure suburban background, and had worked as a riding instructor. Dee came in, offering coffee, and saw what I was reading. Secure little suburban riding instructor, my foot. Really? Her father made her out to be a sweet, innocent little saint. Perhaps he even believes it. Nolan never said any different because it wouldn't have helped him, so no one told the truth. What was the truth? She didn't wear panties, Dee said calmly. Quite a lot of women don't wear underclothes, I said. Is that a fact? She gave me an ironic look. My blushing days are over. Well, do you or don't you want any coffee? Yes, please. She went out to the kitchen and I continued reading clippings, progressing from "No action on the death at Shackleton House" to "Olympia's father brings private prosecution" and "Magistrates refer Nolan Everard case to Crown Court." It was after a bunch of end-of-jumping-season statistics that I came across an oddity from a Reading paper published on a Friday in June. "Girl groom missing," read the headline. Angela Brickell, 17, employed as a lad by prominent racehorse trainer Tmaine Vickers, failed to turn up for work on Tuesday afternoon and hasn't been seen in the stables since. Vickers says lads leave without notice all too often, but he is puzzled that she didn't ask for pay due to her. Anyone knowing Angela Brickell's whereabouts is asked to get in touch with the police. There were no cuttings at all for July, but they began again with various accounts of the opening of the new season in Devon in August. Vickers' victories continue. Nolan had ridden a winner on one of Fiona's horses. The well-known amateur now out on bail facing charges of assault resulting in death. In early September, Nolan had hit the news again, this time in giving evidence at a jockey club inquiry in defence of Tmaine, who stood accused of doping one of his horses, which had tested positive to traces of the stimulants theobromine and caffeine, prohibited substances. The horse in question had won an amateur's race back in May. Belonging to Fiona, it had been ridden by Nolan, who said he had no idea how the drugs had been administered. The jockey club's verdict had been that there was no way of determining who had given the drugs or how, since they couldn't question the groom who had been in charge of the horse, as she, Angela Brickell, could not be found. Tmaine had been adjudged guilty as charged and had been fined £1,500. The drug, theobromine, along with caffeine, commented the reporter suggestively, could commonly be found in chocolate. Well, well, I thought. Tmaine breezed in. "How are you doing?" he said. "I was reading about last year, all those winners." He beamed. Couldn't put a foot wrong. Amazing." "Did Angela Brickell ever turn up?" I asked. "Who?" Oh, no. God knows where she made off to. Every last person in the racing world knows you mustn't give chocolate to horses in training. Everybody knows a Mars bar here or there isn't going to make a horse win a race, but there you are, by the rules, chocolate's a stimulant, so bad luck. Would the girl have got into trouble if she'd stayed? Well, I'd have sacked her, but she'd gone before I heard the horse had tested positive. After lunch, beef sandwiches, we got down to work again on taping his early life with his eccentric father. About mid-afternoon, when we stopped taping, he lent me his Volvo to go to Didcot. The roads were marginally better, and the air not so brutally cold, though the forecaster still spoke of more days' frost. I shopped for food and picked up the books, getting back to Shackleton, while Tmaine was still out in his yard at evening stables. He came into the house with Mackie, both of them stamping their feet and blowing onto their fingers as they discussed the state of their horses. He asked if the books had arrived. They had, I said. "Great, bring them into the family room. Come on, Mackie, gin and tonic." A few minutes later Perkin arrived and collected his coke. Tmaine opened the package of books and handed some of them to him and one to Mackie. Slightly larger than paperbacks, they had white, shiny hard covers, with the title in various bright black-edged colours. Return Safe from the Jungle in green, Return Safe from the Desert in orange, Return Safe from the Sea in blue, Return Safe from the Ice in purple, Return Safe from Safari in red, Return Safe from the Wilderness in a hot, rusty brown. "Oh, they must have taken a lot of work," Mackie observed, turning the pages of C. "But how often do people get marooned on desert islands these days?" I smiled. "Not often." "Survival begins before you set out," Tmaine said, reading the first page of Jungle. He looked up, amused, quoting, "Survival is a frame of mind." "Yes." "I have it," he said. "Indeed you do." Gareth came in at that point. "What are you all so busy with?" he demanded, and then spotted the books. "Boy, oh boy, they've come!" He grabbed up Return from the Wilderness. "Well, there's an awful lot about first aid," he said, turning pages. "How to stop wounds bleeding, how to deal with poisons. Swallow charcoal?" He looked up. "Do you mean it?" "Sure," I said. "Scrape it into water and drink it. The carbon helps take some sorts of poison harmlessly through the gut." "Good God," Tmaine said. His younger son went on reading. "It says here you can drink urine if you distill it." "Gareth," Mackie said. The conversation turned to Lewis and Nolan. I was intrigued to hear that they were as offensive to each other as they appeared to be to the rest of society. Mackie said reflectively, "They haven't quarrelled since Olympia died." "Not in front of us," her husband agreed. "Why do they quarrel?" I asked. "Why does anyone?" Tmaine said. "But those two envy each other. You met them last night, didn't you? Nolan has courage and is thick. Lewis is a physical disaster, but when he's sober, he's a whiz at making money. Lewis would like to be the glamorous amateur jockey, and Nolan would like to be disgustingly rich. Envy." With a swift change of subject, he said, "How well do you ride?" "I haven't ridden a racehorse." "Well, what then?" "Hacks, dude ranch horses, pony trekking, Arab horses in the desert." He pondered. "You care to ride my hack Touchy with a string in the morning? Let's see what you can do." "Right," I said. "I'd like that." With apprehension, I went out into the yard on the following morning, Friday, in jodhpurs, boots, ski jacket and gloves. Touchy was big with bulging muscles. Bob Watson gave me a grin, a helmet and a leg up, and it seemed a fair way down to the ground. Tmaine told me to take my place behind Mackie, who would be leading the string. He himself would be driving the tractor. Bob Watson appeared again at my elbow. "Get him anchored when you set off up the gallop," he said, "or he'll pull your arms out." I followed Mackie out of the yard and across the road and onto the downland. Mackie looked back a few times and watched while I circled with the others as it grew light, and we waited for Tmaine to reach the top of the hill. Snow still lay thinly over everything, and it was another clear morning, stingingly. beautifully cold. Section by section the string set off up the wood chippings track, until only Mackie and I were left. "I'll ride on the right of you," she said, coming up behind me. "Then Tmaine can see how you ride." "Thanks very much," I said ironically. "You'll do all right." She shook up her reins and set off up the wood chippings at a medium canter, glancing back for me to follow. I joined her, expecting to go the whole way at that conservative pace, but she quickened immediately. Towards the end, Mackie kicked her horse into a gallop, and it was at that speed that we both passed Tmaine. Later on, munching the toast I'd made for him, Tmaine passed judgment on my performance. "Yeah, you can ride out every morning," he said, "if you'd like." I said, "I'd like it very much." On Saturday morning I rode touchy again, but Mackie didn't materialise, having phoned Tmaine to say she wasn't well. She and Perkin appeared in the kitchen during breakfast, he with an arm round her shoulders. "We've something to tell you," Perkin said to Tmaine. "Oh, yes." Tmaine was busy with some papers. "Yes, do pay attention. We're having a baby." Tmaine was clearly delighted. He purred like a cat and beat the table with his fist. Son and daughter-in-law had no difficulty in reading the signals and looked pleased with themselves. The birth, they revealed, would occur in September. On Sunday morning, Fiona and Harry came to the stables to see her horses and drink with Tmaine afterwards in the family room. Nolan came with them, but not Lewis. An aunt of Harry's, another Mrs. Goodhaven, tagged quietly along. Mackie, Perkin and Gareth were also there. Mackie couldn't keep her good news to herself. Fiona and Harry hugged her. Perkin looked important. Tmaine opened champagne. At about that time, 10 miles away in lonely woodland, a gamekeeper came across what was left of Angela Brickle. In Tramaine's house, when the toasts to the future vicars had been drunk, Gareth showed Fiona a couple of the travel guides, and Fiona showed Harry. Harry's aunt was looking into Safe Return from the Ice. Harry led me over to her. "Erica," he said, "John wrote these books." "And a novel," Tmaine said. "It's going to be published, and he's writing my biography." "A novel," Harry's aunt said. "Going to be published? How interesting. I also write novels, under my unmarried name, Erica Upton." Erica Upton's 5-star prize-winning reputation was for erudition, elegant syntax, esoteric backgrounds, elegiac characters, and profound understanding. "Your aunt," I said to Harry. "By marriage." She was a slender, grey-haired woman in a grey wool dress, with flat shoes and no jewellery. A quintessential aunt, I thought, except that most people's aunts weren't Erica Upton. "What is your novel about?" she inquired. "Survival," I said politely. "What sort of survival?" she asked. "It's about some travellers cut off by an earthquake, about how they coped. It's called Long Way Home." "How quaint," she said. She turned away to begin talking to Fiona. "These survival guides are pretty good," Harry said, as if he thought my ego needed patching. "Do you mind if we take a few of them home?" Angela Brickle's remains lay on the Quiller's Edge estate at the western edge of the Chilterns. The Quiller's Edge gamekeeper arranged on the telephone for the local police to collect him from his cottage on the estate and drive as near to the bones as possible on the estate's private roads. In Tramaine's house, Fiona and Mackie sat on a sofa talking about Mackie's baby. Nolan talked horses with Tmaine. Gareth handed round potato crisps, and Perkin read aloud how to return safely from getting lost. "Go downhill, not up," he read. "People live in valleys. Follow streams in their flow direction. People live beside rivers." When they'd all gone, Tmaine and I went round collecting glasses and stacking them in the dishwasher. Gareth said, "If we can have beef sandwich pie again, I'll make it." At about the time we finally ate the pie, 2 policemen and the gamekeeper reached the bones. Slowly the information percolated upwards until it reached Detective Chief Inspector Dune, Thames Valley Police, who was sleeping off his Yorkshire pudding. After lunch, Gareth and I went up to my bedroom because he wanted to see the survival kit that I'd brought with me. I handed him a flat tin, smaller than a paperback book, held shut with black insulating tape. "Open it carefully," I said. He did as I said, laying out the contents on the white counterpane on the bed and reciting them aloud. 2 matchbooks, a bit of candle, a little coil of thin wire, a piece of jagged wire, some fishhooks, a small pencil and piece of paper, needles and thread, 2 sticking plasters, and a plastic bag folded up small and held by a paper clip. He looked disappointed. You couldn't do much with those. Just light a fire, cut wood, catch food, collect water, make a map, and sew up wounds. That jagged wire is a flexible saw. His mouth opened. Then I always carried 2 things on my belt. I unstrapped it and showed it to him. The belt itself has a zipped pocket all along the inside where you can keep money. Those other things on the belt, one is a knife, one is a multi-purpose survival tool. In a black canvas sheath was a folding knife with a cunningly serrated blade, very sharp indeed, 9 inches overall when open, only 5 when closed. Gareth opened it. "Phew, that's some knife," he said. He opened the other object slotted onto the belt, a small leather case about 3 inches by 2.5, which contained a flat metal rectangular object, a shade smaller in dimension. Its total weight was 3.5 ounces. "What's this?" he asked. "I carry that instead of an ordinary penknife. It has a blade slotted in one side and scissors in the other. That little round thing is a magnifying glass for starting fires if there's any sun. With those other odd-shaped edges you can make holes in a tin of food, open crown cork bottles, screw in screws, file your nails, and sharpen knives. The sides have inches and centimetres marked like a ruler, and the back of it all is polished like a mirror for signalling." "Wow!" He turned it over and looked at his own face. "It's really brill!" Next I handed him a black pouch designed to be attached to my belt. I let him open its 3 zipped and velcroed pockets to lay the contents again on the bed. "What's this?" He pointed to a short, fat spool of thin yellow thread. "That's Kevlar fibre. It's a sort of plastic, strong as steel, 600 yards of it. You can make nets of it, tie anything, fish with it, twist it into fine, unbreakable rope." "And this little jar of whitish liquid packed with a sawn-off brush?" I smiled. "That's in the Wilderness book. It's luminous paint." He stared. "If you have a camp, and you want to leave it to go and look for food or firewood, well, you want to be able to find your way back again, don't you? So, as you go, you paint a splash of this on a tree trunk or a rock. Then you can find your way back even in the dark." "Cool," he said. A thought struck him. "You haven't got a compass." I produced a tiny one from my shirt pocket. He was impressed. "Luminous," I said solemnly. We went back down to the family room where we found Tmaine asleep. Gareth beckoned me to follow him through to the central hall. There he walked across and knocked briefly on Mackie and Perkin's door, which, after an interval, was opened slowly by Perkin. "Can we come in for 5 minutes?" Gareth said. "Dad's asleep in his chair." Perkin led the way into his sitting room, where he and Mackie had been reading the Sunday newspapers. Gareth asked Perkin, "Can I show John your workroom? Don't touch anything, I mean anything. Cross my heart." The room where Perkin created his future antiques was of generous size, like all the rooms in the house. It was extremely tidy, with a polished wood-block floor swept spotless, not a shaving or speck of sawdust in sight. There was a gas cooker standing against one wall. "He heats glue on that," Gareth said, seeing me looking, "and other sorts of muck like linseed oil." He pointed across the room. "That's his lathe, that's his saw bench, that's his sanding machine." I swanned round the room, looking at sheets of veneer stacked against a wall, and at little orderly piles of square-cut lengths from exotic black to golden walnut. Gareth stopped by a long solid worktop like a butcher's block, and said to me over his shoulder, "I should think he's just started on this." I went across to look and saw a pencil drawing of a display cabinet of slender lines and great elegance, a piece designed to draw the eye to its contents, not itself. As we turned to leave, I said, "Was it in their sitting room that poor girl died?" "Gruesome," Gareth said, nodding. I didn't see her. Perkin did, though. He went in just after Mackie and Harry found it all happening." Tmaine promoted me from touchy to a still actively racing steeplechaser that Monday morning, a 9-year-old gelding called Drifter. I was also permitted to do a regular working gallop, and by great good fortune didn't fall off. The sun shone, and a thaw was well under way.
When we returned from the newly greenish-brownish downs, there was a man drinking coffee in the kitchen. He was young, short and thin, wearing self-assurance as an outer garment. "Hey, Sam," Tmaine said. "Ready for work?" "Too sodding right. I'm as stiff as a friggin' virgin." Tmaine said to me, "This is Sam Yeager, our jockey." To Sam Yeager he explained my presence. Sam Yeager nodded to me. He wore jodhpurs along with a brilliant yellow sweatshirt. Dee, appearing for her coffee, brightened at the sight of him. "Morning, Loverboy," she said. Loverboy made a stab at pinching her bottom as she passed behind him, which she seemed not to mind. I made the toast. Sam Yeager watched with raised eyebrows. "You don't look like a sodding writer." "So many people aren't." "Aren't what?" "What they look like," I said. "Well, what do I look like?" he demanded. "Like someone who won the Grand National among 89 other races last year and finished third on the jockeys list." "You've been peeking," he said. I dealt out the toast and made some more. Sam's presence dominated breakfast, and I wondered how he got on with Nolan. I asked Dee that question after Sam and Tmaine had gone out with the second lot. "Get on," she repeated ironically. "No, they do not. Sam doesn't like Nolan riding so many of the stable's horses, but Tmaine runs more horses in amateur races than most trainers do. Wins more, too, because whatever else you can say about Nolan, no one denies he's a brilliant jockey." She frowned and then decided to go on. "Their rivalry isn't just a matter of riding," she said. "It's women as well." "Women?" "They're rivals there, too. The night the night Olympia died." "Go on." "Nolan brought her to the party, and Sam made a beeline for her." Somewhere in her voice was indulgence for Sam Yeager, censure for Nolan. "Did he, know Olympia?" "Never set eyes on her before. None of us knew her. Nolan went to fetch her a drink. When he came back, she'd gone off with Sam. Nolan seemed to think that they'd have headed for the stables, and he went looking for them. Came back into the house cursing and swearing, and telling me he'd strangled the bitch." I retired to the dining room, and since the shape of Tmaine's passage through life was more and more becoming clear, I began to map out the book into sections, giving each a tentative title with subheadings. Out in the woodland, Detective Chief Inspector Dune looked morosely at Angela Brickle's jumbled bones, while the pathologist told him they were those of a young female, dead probably less than a year. The bones were packed into a box, carried to a van, and driven to the mortuary. Detective Chief Inspector Dune set 2 constables to searching the undergrowth. Under a blanket of dead leaves, they came across some wet, filthy jeans, a small-sized bra, a pair of panties, and a T-shirt. The girl had been naked when she died. Tmaine came back from second lot. He wheeled straight into the offices and fired off a barrage of instructions to Dee. Then he came into the dining room to ask a favour or two. The ditched jeep had gone to the big scrap heap in the sky. A replacement had been found in Newbury, a not new but serviceable Land Rover. If I would go to Newbury in the Volvo with him, I could drive the substitute home to Shackleton. "Of course," I said. He wished to go out for the evening to play poker with friends, and he'd be back late. Would I stay in for Gareth? "Sure," I said. "He's old enough to be safe on his own, but, well." "Company," I said. "Someone around." He nodded. "You're welcome," I said. In the evening, after Tmaine had departed to his card game, Gareth and I made shepherd's pie. Afterwards he said, "Will you write down all the ingredients so I can make one when you're gone?" "Sure thing." "I wouldn't mind if you stayed." Loneliness was an ache in his voice. I said, "I'll be here another 3 weeks." On Tuesday morning, the pathologist made his report to Detective Chief Inspector Dune. "The bones are those of a young adult female, probably 5'4" or 5", about 20 years old. There was a small remaining patch of scalp with a few hairs still adhering. The hairs are medium brown." "How long since she died?" Dune asked. "I'd say last summer. Cause of death? Her hyoid bone is fractured." "You sure?" "Positive. She was strangled." Detective Chief Inspector Dune sent his men to search the whole area where the bones had been discovered again. This was now a murder investigation, he reminded them. On Wednesday, the Thor now well underway, racing resumed. When we came in from first lot, Sam Yeager was again in the kitchen. This time he came not in his car, but with a borrowed pickup truck. in which he proposed to collect some Burma teak that Perkin had acquired for him. "Sam has a boat," Tmaine told me dryly. Sam Yeager grinned cheerfully. "It's already sold, or as good as," he told me. "I buy clapped-out boats and make them better than new. I sold the last one to one of those soddy newspaper moguls." "Where do you keep it?" I asked. "Maidenhead, on the Thames. I bought a bankrupt boatyard there a while back." Tmaine and Sam began to discuss the horses he would be running at Windsor races that afternoon, Tmaine telling Sam that blue cheesecake is better, not worse for the layoff, and give just the thing and easy if you feel her wavering. I don't want her ruined while she's still green. "Right," Sam said, concentrating. "What about cashless? Do I ride him in front again?" What do you think?" "Well, he likes it better. He just got beat by faster horses last time." "Go off in front, then." "Right." "Nolan rides Telebiddy in the amateur race," Tmaine said, "unless the Jockey Club puts a stop to it, because of him being a convicted felon." He smiled wryly. At about that time, Detective Chief Inspector Dune went into the incident room for the bones investigation and laid out on a trestle table the bits and pieces that his men had gleaned from the woodland. There were the clothes found originally. There was also a pair of well-worn and misshapen trainers, still sodden, which might once have been white. Apart from those, there were 4 soft-drink cans, a pair of broken sunglasses, a puckered leather belt with split stitches, a gin bottle, a blue plastic comb, a well-chewed rubber ball, a gold-plated ballpoint pen, a pink lipstick, chocolate bar wrappers, and a broken dog collar. Detective Chief Inspector Dune stared at the haul from all angles. He called in his men and told them to go back to the woods and widen the search, and he himself, as he had the day before, went through his list of missing persons, trying to make a match. Tmaine took me for a quick sandwich and a drink soon after our arrival on Windsor Racecourse, and from then on began a darting progress, into the weighing room to fetch his jockey's saddle and weight cloth, off to the saddling boxes to put on the tack, into the parade ring to join the owners and give last-minute orders to the jockey, off up to the stands to watch the horses run, down again to the unsaddling areas, and then off to the weighing room to pick up another saddle and start all over again. Nolan was there, anxiously asking if Tmaine had received any thumbs down from the Jockey Club. "No," Tmaine said. "Have you?" "Not an effing peep." "You ride, then," Tmaine said. "Telebiddy's owners are here with their betting money burning holes in their pockets. So deliver the goods, eh?" Sam Yeager slouched up beside us and annoyed Nolan by patting him on the back. "Go easy on blue cheesecake," Nolan said. "I don't want him effing loused up before I ride him in the Kim Muir at Cheltenham." Sam answered, "I'm not nannying any sodding amateur. The Kim Muir is his main effing target." "Effie's sodding target." Sam made no concessions on blue cheesecake. It was push, shove, slap, crack all the way, and it was only in the last few strides blue cheesecake's nose showed decisively in front. Tmaine had set off at a run to the winner's enclosure. After he'd received his due congratulations, inspected his sweating charge, and talked briefly to the press, he followed Sam into the weighing room to fetch the saddle for just the thing. When he came out, he was escorted by Nolan, who was complaining ferociously that Sam had given blue cheesecake a viciously hard race and spoiled his, Nolan's, chances at Cheltenham. "Cheltenham is 6 weeks off," Tmaine said calmly. "Plenty of time." Sam rode just the thing in the next event, a hurdle race, with inconspicuous gallantry, providing the inexperienced mare with a clear view of the jumps, and only urging her on at the end to give her a good idea of what was expected. She finished a respectable third, to Tramaine's almost tangible pleasure, and it was fascinating to me to have heard the plans beforehand and see them put into exact effect. On Telebiddy, Nolan gave a display of razor-sharp competence that made most of the other amateurs look like Sunday drivers. He won by 10 lengths pulling up. Finally, we watched Cashless set off in front, as expected, a position he easily held until the last 50 yards. Then 3 jockeys who had been waiting behind him stepped on the accelerator, and although Cashless didn't in any way give up, the 3 others passed him. Tmaine shrugged. "Too bad." We reached the parade ring where the unsuccessful runners were being unsaddled. Sam, looping girths over his arm, gave Tmaine a rueful smile and said Cashless had done his best. "Yeah, I saw," Tmaine agreed. "Can't be helped." We watched Sam walk off towards the weighing room, and Tmaine remarked thoughtfully that he might try Cashless in an amateur race and see what Nolan could do. "Do you play them off against each other on purpose?" I asked. Tmaine gave me a flickering glance. "I do the best for my owners," he said. "Like a drink?" At about the time we were driving home, Detective Chief Inspector Dune was poring over the increased pickings from the woodland. Among the new collection lay a woman's handbag. It had been torn open on one side, probably by a dog. All the same, it still contained, in an inner pocket, a small mirror and a folded photograph frame. Dune opened the frame and found inside, water-stained along one edge, but otherwise sharply clear, a coloured snapshot of a man standing beside a horse. On Thursday morning, Tmaine was upstairs showering and dressing before going to Toaster races when the doorbell rang. Dee presently came into the dining room looking mystified. "They say they're policemen. I've put them in the family room until Tmaine comes down. Go and keep an eye on them. Would you mind?" "Sure," I said. "Are you Tmaine Vickers?" one of them asked when I went in. "No, he'll be down soon. Can I help?" "I am Detective Chief Inspector Dune, Thames Valley Police," he said. "This is Detective Constable Rich." Dune appeared to be about 50, with grey-dusted, light-brown hair and a heavy medium-brown moustache. He had light-brown eyes and big, bony hands. Tmaine came in buttoning the blue and white striped cuffs of his shirt and carrying his jacket. Dune introduced himself. "Police?" Tmaine said. "What about?" "We'd like to speak to you alone, sir." I returned to the dining room, but presently heard Tramaine's voice calling, "John, come back here, would you?" I went back. Dune was protesting about my presence. Tmaine said, "I want him to hear it. Will you repeat what you said?" Dune shrugged. "I came to inform Mr. Vickers that some remains have been found which may prove to be those of a young woman who was once employed here." "Angela Brickell," Tmaine said resignedly. "Oh." "They have a photograph," Tmaine said. "They're trying to identify the man." He turned to Dune. "Show it to him." Dune handed me a photograph enclosed in a plastic holder. "Do you know this man, sir?" he asked. I glanced at Tmaine. "You may as well tell him," he said. "Harry Goodhaven?" Tmaine nodded. "That's the owner's horse, Chickweed, the one they said was doped." "Who is this man, this Harry Goodhaven?" Dune demanded. "The husband of the owner of the horse." "Why would Angela Brickell be carrying his photograph?" "She wasn't," Tmaine said. "It was the horse's photograph she was carrying. She looked after it." Dune looked unconvinced by the distinction. He said, "Sir, can you give me the address of this Harry Goodhaven?" Tmaine answered, "This Harry Goodhaven, as you call him, is Mr. Henry Goodhaven, who owns the Manor House, Shackleton." Dune made a visible readjustment in his mind. "I'm already running late," Tmaine said, making moves to leave. "I don't think you understand, sir," Dune said. "Angela Brickell was strangled." "What?" Tmaine stopped dead, stunned. "Strangled," Dune repeated. "And, sir," he hesitated, "only last week, sir, we had a Crown Court case about another young woman who was strangled here in this house." There was silence. Dune said, "Did Mr. Nolan Eberard have any connections with Angela Brickell?" "Yes, of course he did. He rides Chickweed, the horse in that photograph. He saw Angela Brickell quite often in the course of her work." He paused. "But all the same, Chief Inspector, I do now have to go to the races. Stay as long as you like, ask whatever you want. John, tell Mackie and Bob what's happened, will you? Phone the car if you need me. Right, I'm off." "Well, Chief Inspector," I said when he had gone, "where do you want to begin?" "Your name, sir?" I gave it. "And your, position here?" "I'm writing a history of the stables." "And, did you know the deceased?" "Angela Brickell? No, I didn't. I've been here only 10 days. "Well, sir," he said, "you can start introducing me to all the people here and explain why I'm asking questions. And if you don't mind, sir, will you please just tell everyone she's been found, not that she was strangled?" "How do you know that she was strangled if there's nothing much left?" "The hyoid bone, sir, in the throat, fractured. Only a direct blow or manual pressure does that. Fingers, usually, from behind." "I see. All right. Well, we'd better start with Mr. Vickers' secretary, Dee. I steered him into the office and introduced him. Detective Constable Rich followed everywhere like a shadow, a non-speaking taker of notes. Dune asked Dee Dee if she knew of any reason for Angela Brickle's disappearance. Had the girl been unhappy, having rows with a boyfriend? "I've no idea. We didn't find out until after she'd gone that she might have given chocolate to Chickweed. Stupid thing to do." Dune looked lost. I explained about theobromine. "We found some chocolate bar wrappers with the lass," Dune said. "No chocolate. Is that what was meant in our notes by possibly doped a horse in her charge?" "Spot on," Dee Dee nodded. I said, "Are you thinking she might have been involved in a doping ring?" "Have to consider everything." Dune asked to be taken out to the stables. Bob Watson was alone there, beavering away with saw, hammer and nails, making a new saddle horse to hold the saddles in the tack room. I introduced Dune, who told him that some human remains discovered by chance were thought to be those of Angela Brickle. "No," Bob said. "Straight up. Poor little bitch." "Was she unhappy over a boyfriend?" Dune asked. "Well, not that I know of. Truth to tell, I can't remember much about her, except she was sexy. Ask Mrs. Goodhaven, she was always kind to her. Ask the other girls here. Some of them lived in a hostel with her." They talked for a while longer. "You want to see Mackie?" Bob said in the end. "That's young Mrs. Vickers. The girls tell her things they'd never tell me." Dune nodded, and I led him and Rich round the house to Mackie and Perkin's entrance. Perkin came to the door. "Hello," he said. "Mackie's in the shower." Dune introduced himself. "I came to let Mrs. Vickers know that Angela Brickle's been found," he said. "Who?" Perkin said blankly. A thought struck him. "I say, is she the stable girl who buggered off sometime last year? I remember a bit of a fuss." "That's the one." "Good, then. My wife will be glad she's found. I'll give her the message." Dune said he would like to see Mrs. Vickers himself. "Oh, all right." He led the way into a kitchen dining room where I hadn't been before. Mackie arrived with damp hair, looking refreshed and pleased with life. She listened to Dune, who did not reveal the cause of death, and faced the implications squarely. "You're telling us, aren't you," she said flatly, "that either she killed herself or somebody killed her?" "I didn't say that, madam." "As good as," she sighed desolately. "We've just had months and months of trouble and anxiety over Olympia and Nolan. And now it's starting all over again." I borrowed the Land Rover, and at Dune's request led him to the house in the village which the girls called their hostel, a small modern house in a cul-de-sac. He sat paternally on a flower-patterned sofa in the sitting-room, among the pot plants and endless photographs of horses, and asked the by now familiar questions. Did they think Angela had been involved in doping horses, and did they know if she'd had rows with her boyfriend? She definitely hadn't been doping horses. They found the idea funny. She wasn't bright enough, one of them said. They didn't know of any one steady boyfriend. They thought Sam had probably had her, but no one should read much in that. Who was Sam? Sam Yeager, the stable jockey, who rode more than the horses. They looked at the photograph he passed round. "Oh, that's Chickweed," they said, nodding. "And the man?" "Mr. Goodhaven." We said our goodbyes and travelled back through the village to a bungalow nearer Bob Watson's house, where the unmarried lads lived. The lads all knew that Angela Brickle had been found dead, as one of them had learned it from Bob Watson. "She rode all right," one of them said, shrugging. "She was a bit of a hot pants," said another. They identified Chickweed's picture immediately, and one of them asked if he could have the photo when the police had finished with it. "Why?" Dune asked. "Because I look after the old bugger now, that's why." The telephone in Shackleton House began ringing that afternoon in a clamour that lasted for days. Another young woman connected with Tmaine Vickers' house and stables had been found dead. Newspapers, quickly informed, brusquely demanded to be told where, when, and why. I worked on the book and answered the phone most of Friday. On Saturday, Tmaine asked me to go to Sandown with Fiona, Harry, and Mackie. He himself would be saddling 5 runners at Chepstow. "Go and carry things for Mackie," he said. Harry and Fiona collected Mackie and me at the appointed time. Harry was driving. Fiona twisted round in the front seat to speak to Mackie and me. She told us that Dune had paid 2 visits to them the day before, the first apparently friendly, and the second menacing in the extreme. "And he more or less accused Harry of strangling that bloody girl." "What?" Mackie said. "That's ridiculous." "Dune doesn't think so," Harry said gloomily. "He says she was definitely strangled." "And did he show you that photo of me with Chickweed?" Mackie and I both said yes. "Well, it seems he got it enlarged, blown up really big. He said he wanted to see me alone, without Fiona, and he showed me the enlargement, which was just of me, not the horse. He asked me to confirm that I was wearing my own sunglasses in the photo.
I said of course I was. Then he asked me if I was wearing my own belt, and I said I wouldn't be wearing anyone else's. Then he asked me if the pen clipped onto the race card I was holding in the photo was mine also. I demanded to know what it was all about. Apparently, they found my sunglasses and my belt and my gold pen lying with that girl. I don't know how the hell they got there. I told Dune I hadn't seen any of them for ages, and he said he believed it. He thought they'd been with Angela Brickell all these months, that I'd dropped them when I was with her. Fiona said, Dune demanded to know precisely where Harry had been on the day that girl went missing. Well, where were you on that day, I asked. I mean, you might have a perfect alibi. I don't know where I was. Could you say for certain what you were doing on the Tuesday afternoon of the second week of June last year? Not for sure, I said. We keep a big appointments diary, Fiona said. There's nothing listed at all on that second Tuesday. Neither of us can remember what we were doing. We went to see Nolan ride Chickweed at Uttoxeter near the end of May, Fiona said. Angela was there looking after the horse. That was the day someone fed him theobromine and caffeine. Anyway, Chickweed won and Angela went back to Shackleton with him, and we saw her a few days later and gave her an extra present. I can't remember seeing her again after that. Nor can I, Harry said. Someone must have put those things there to incriminate Harry, Mackie said unhappily. It was a subdued little group that stood in the parade ring watching Fiona's tough hunter, the famous Chickweed, walk round before the Wilfred Johnston Hunter chase. Mackie saw Nolan into the saddle, and the four of us walked towards the stand to see the race. Chickweed was easy to spot, I discovered, with the white blaze down his chestnut face, nodding away on the rails at every galloping step. Watch them jump the 7 fences down the far side, Tmaine had said. If a horse meets the first one right, the others come in his stride. Missed the first, get it wrong, legs in a tangle, you might as well forget the whole race. Nolan's an artist at meeting that first fence right. Chickweed flew the first fence and all the next 6 down the far side, gaining effortless lengths. He repeated the virtuoso performance on the second circuit. A length in front of his nearest pursuer, he swept round the long bend at the bottom end of the course and straightened up for the third fence from home. Oh, come on, Fiona said explosively. Chickweed, jump it! Chickweed rose to it as if he'd heard her, his white blaze showing straight onto us before he veered right towards the second-last fence and the uphill pull to home. Chickweed made short work of the second-last fence, but didn't shake off his nearest pursuer, who closed the gap coming to the last fence. Chickweed made a spectacular leap, wasting precious time in the air. His pursuer, jumping in a flatter trajectory, landed first and was fastest away. Nolan's whip rose and fell twice. The jockey and horse in front eased up fractionally too soon. Chickweed put his head in front just where it mattered. It was Nolan I saw who had won that race. Nolan himself, not the horse. Nolan's ability, Nolan's character, acting on Chickweed's. Winning races, like survival, began in the mind. We arrived back at Shackleton before Tmaine returned from Chepstow. There was a message from Gareth on the family room corkboard. Gone to movie, back for grub. A knock on the back door drew me to see who it was, and I didn't at first recognise Bob Watson's wife, Ingrid. Come in, I said, but I'm the only one home. She seemed to be screwing herself up to something, and out it all finally came in a rush. You were ever so kind to me that night. Bob reckons you saved me from pneumonia. You looked so cold, I said. I knew you'd come back just now. I saw Mrs. Goodhaven's car come up the road. I came to talk to you, really. I'm listening. Angela Brickell was a Roman Catholic like I am. Was she? The news meant very little. Ingrid nodded. It said on the local radio news tonight that Angela's body was found last Sunday by a gamekeeper on the Quiller's Edge estate, and it said foul play was suspected. Anyway, after she'd vanished last year, Mackie asked me to clear all her things out of the hostel and send them to her parents, and I did. She stopped. What did you find? I asked. I threw it away, she said. It was a do-it-yourself kit for a pregnancy test. She'd used it. All I found was the empty box. Tmaine came home and frightened Ingrid away like Miss Muffet and the spider. What does she want? He asked. She came to tell me something she thinks should be known, I said reflectively. Angela Brickell may have been pregnant. Pregnant? I explained. She was a Roman Catholic, Ingrid says. Well, what's that got to do with it? They're against abortion.
He stared into space. I said, "Harry's in trouble, have you heard?" I told him about Dune's accusations. Tmaine poured himself a gin and tonic of suitably gargantuan proportions, and told me in his turn that he'd had a rotten day at Chepstow. "One of my runners broke down and another fell. Sam dislocated his thumb and won't be fit to ride again until Tuesday, which means I have to scratch around for a replacement for Monday." He flopped his weight into an armchair, stretched out his legs, and rested his gaze on his toe-caps. "Are you going to tell Dune about the pregnancy test?" he asked finally. "I suppose so." He sighed. "It won't do Harry much good." Mackie and Perkin came through for their usual drink and news exchange, and even Chickweed's win couldn't disperse the general gloom.
"Angela pregnant?" Mackie shook her head, bewildered. "She didn't say anything about it."
"She might have done, given time," Tmaine said. On Sunday it rained. In spite of this, young Gareth held me to a promise that I would spend the day with him and his friend Coconut, outdoors, teaching them something about survival. We did survive, but only just. On our return, I peeled off my long-suffering ski suit and left the boys in the kitchen, heading myself for warmth in the family room, and there I found Harry, Fiona, Nolan, Lewis, Perkin, Mackie, and Tmaine all silent, as if everything useful had been said already. "Ah, John," Tmaine said, stirring, remembering. "Are both boys still living?" "More or less." I poured myself some wine and sat on an unoccupied footstool. At that moment, Sam Yeager swept into the house in a high state of indignation. "You're supposed to be resting," Tmaine said. "Tell with bloody resting. There I was, quietly nursing my bruises according to orders, when this policeman plod turns up on my doorstep. And do you know what little Jemmy tossed at me? Your bloody stable girls told him I'd had a bit of how's your father with Angela effing Brickle." "Well, did you?" Tmaine asked. "The point is that it wasn't any Tuesday last June. So this Dune fellow asked me what I was doing that day, as if I could remember. Working on my boat, I expect. He asked if I logged the hours I worked on it. Is this man for real?" "He has 3 daughters," I said. "It worries him." "I can't help his hang-up," Sam said. "He said he had to check every possibility, so I told him he'd have a long job considering old Angie's opportunities, not to mention willingness." He paused. "Can I have a drink? Coke?" "In the fridge, in the kitchen," Perkin said. Sam nodded, went out, and came back carrying a glass, followed by Gareth and Coconut, busily stoking their furnaces with pizza wedges. Tmaine raised his eyebrows. "We're starving," explained his younger son. "We ate roots and birch bark and dandelion leaves." Sam looked bewildered. "What are you on about?" he demanded. "Survival," Gareth said. He marched over to a table, picked up Return Safe from the Wilderness, and thrust it into Sam's hands. "John wrote it," he said, "and 5 other books like it. So we built a shelter, and made a fire, and cooked roots, and boiled water to drink. Next time," Coconut inquired, "why don't we make some bows and arrows, and shoot a rabbit?" The 2 boys drifted back to the kitchen for further supplies, and Sam, leafing through the book, remarked that some of my more ingenious traps looked as if they would kill actual people, not only big animals like deer. I said, "Some traps aren't safe to set unless you know you're alone." "The perfect scoutmaster," Nolan said to me without much friendliness from the depths of an armchair. "I'd like to see you ride in a steeplechase." "So would I," Tmaine said heartily, taking the sneering words at face value. "We might apply for a permit for you, John." Nolan didn't like even a humorous suggestion that anyone else should muscle in on his territory. Monday found Dune on our doorstep, wanting to check up on the dates when Chickweed had won and Harry had been there to watch, on his own. Tmaine said that there had been no occasion when Harry had been at the races without Fiona. "How about the 4th Saturday in April?" Dune asked slyly. "At Utoxeter." "Well, what about it?" "Your travelling head lad thinks Mrs. Goodhaven had flu that day." "Well, have you asked Mr. Goodhaven about that?" Dune nodded. "He denies anything improper took place, but then he would." By Tuesday, the press had been drenched with leaks from all quarters. Harry Goodhaven had allegedly bedded a stable girl, got her pregnant, and throttled her to save his marriage to a wealthy heiress without whose money he would be penniless. He phoned soon after lunch on Wednesday. I answered the phone because Tmaine and Mackie had gone racing. "Did you see the bloody tabloids?" "Yes," I said. "If I come and pick you up, will you just come out driving with me?" Sure. Fine. 10 minutes. Without many twinges of conscience, I laid aside my notes on Tmaine's mid-career. Harry came in his BMW, twin of Fiona's, and I climbed in beside him, seeing more new lines of strain in his face. He turned the nose of the car towards Reading to travel by the hilly route that would take us through the Quiller's Edge estate. Why are we going this way? The question surprised him. To get to where we're going, of course. So we're not just out for a drive. Well, no. We drove a fair way, going across country to heaven knew where. Harry, however, knew where, and after going down a mostly uninhabited lane, turned through some broken gateposts into a rutted drive leading to a large, sagging barn, an extensive dump of tangled metal and wood, and a smaller barn to one side. Beyond this unprepossessing mess lay a wide expanse of muddy grey water sliding sluggishly by. "Where are we?" I asked, as the car rolled to a stop. "That's the Thames," Harry said, almost breaking its banks by the looks of things, after all that rain and melted snow. "This is Sam's boatyard." "This?" "He keeps it this way on purpose," Harry confirmed. "Thieves think there's nothing worth stealing. We all came here for a huge barbecue party he gave to celebrate being champion jockey. 18 months ago, I suppose. It looked different that night." His voice tailed off, and there was sweat on his forehead. "What's making you nervous?" I asked. "Nothing." It was clearly a lie. "Come with me," he said jerkily. "I want someone with me." "All right. Where are we going?" "Into the boathouse." He pointed to the smaller of the barns. "That big place on the left is Sam's workshop and dock where he works on his boats. I'm going to meet someone in the boathouse." He looked at his watch. "I'm a bit early." "Who are you going to meet?" "Someone," he said, and got out of the car. "I don't know who. Look," he went on as I followed him, "I've been offered some information which may clear me with Dune. I just wanted support. A witness, even. I suppose you think that's stupid. No? Well, come on, then. How was the meeting arranged?" "On the telephone," he said, "this morning. I didn't know the voice. I don't even know if it was a man or a woman." He led the way across some rough ground. The boathouse was mostly of weathered old brick, the long side walls going down to the water's edge. The ramshackle wooden door pushed inwards, opening at a touch. Windows in the walls gave plenty of light, but inside all one could see was a bare wooden floor stretching to double glass doors leading to a railed balcony overhanging the swollen river. "Don't boathouses have water in them?" I inquired mildly. "The water's underneath," Harry said. "This room was for entertaining. There's another door down by the edge of the river for going into the boat dock." "Did Sam invite Nolan to his party?" Harry nodded. "He asked Dee Dee, Bob Watson, the lads, everyone. Must have been 150 people. Even Angela." He stopped and looked at his watch. "It's just about time." He turned and took a step towards the far-end balcony. There was a white envelope lying on the floor about halfway to the balcony. He went towards it and bent to pick it up. With a fearsome crack, a whole section of the floor gave way under his weight and shot him, shouting, into the dock beneath. I wriggled forward until I could peer over the edge into the wet depths below, and I couldn't see him at all. "Shit," I thought, peeling off my jacket. "Come up, for God's sake, Harry." No sign of him. Nothing. I kicked off my boots and swung down below, holding onto a bared crossbeam. I let go and felt the breath rush out of my lungs from the iciness of the river. I stretched my feet down to touch bottom and found the water came up to my ears. Took a deep breath and put my head under, but I was unable to see anything at all. Time short. I stood up and saw a red stain in the water a short way off. I dived towards the scarlet streaks and touched him at once, but when I tried to pull him to the surface, I couldn't. I slid my arms under Harry's and yanked him upwards as fiercely as I could, and found him still stuck, and yanked again twice more with increasing desperation, until, finally, whatever had been holding him released its grasp, and he came shooting to the surface, choking and gasping for air. I started looking him out to see how we were going to get out of the water. Another door, Harry had said, down by the river's edge, and, in fact, when I looked I could see it, its bottom edge barely 6 inches above the water. Across the whole end of the building, stretching from the ceiling down into the river, was a chain-linked metal curtain. Beyond it flowed the heavy main stream. The dock itself, I well understood, was deeper than usual because of the height of the river,
The door was still 6 inches above it, though. It didn't make sense to build a door that high up if the water was usually lower. Not unless there was a step somewhere, a step or a walkway even for the loading and unloading of boats. Taking Harry with me, I moved to the left, towards the wall, and found that there was indeed a shelf there at about the height of my waist. I lifted Harry until he was sitting on the walkway, and then, still gripping him tightly, wriggled up beside him so that we were both sitting there with our heads above water. Harry was semi-conscious, confused, and bleeding. I had to get him propped so that he wouldn't fall forward and drown, and to do that I reckoned we needed to be in the corner. I tugged him gently along the walkway, and in a while he was sitting wedged in the corner, supported by the rear and side walls. The blood was coming from one of his legs. Just then, I heard the main door creak open directly above our heads, the way Harry and I had come in. My first impulse was to shout, to get help from whoever had come. But then a whole stream of thoughts intruded and silenced me. Harry had come to this place to meet someone. He didn't know who. He tried to pick up an envelope, and the floor had given way beneath him, and if I hadn't been there with him, I guessed at an enemy above our heads, not a saviour. I waited for exclamations of horror from above, for someone to call Harry's name in alarm. Instead, there was silence, then the creak of a step or two, then the sound of the door being quietly closed. In a short while I heard the sound of a car door slamming, and after that the noise of an engine starting up and being driven away. Harry suddenly said, "Bloody hell!" Then he said, "What the hell's happening?" And then, "God, my leg hurts." We came through the boathouse floor. I pointed to the hole. "I'm freezing." "Yes, I know. Are you awake enough to sit here on your own for a bit?" "John, for God's sake." "Not long," I said hastily. I stood up on the walkway. The water level reached above my knees. I waded along beside the wall in the direction of the lower door and the river. No easy exit. The door was solid as a rock. "Harry," I called. "God, John." His voice sounded weak and strained. "Sit there and don't worry. I'll come back." I slipped back into the water and swam a couple of strokes to the chain-link curtain. Tried standing, but the water was much deeper there. Hung onto the wire, feeling the tug of the eddies from the river. I took a breath and pulled myself hand over hand down the curtain, seeking to find the bottom of it with my feet. And there was a gap between the bottom edge of the curtain and the mud, but only a matter of inches. I came up for air. Deep breath, dived, pulling myself down the wire, came to the end of it, felt the mud below. I swung down, deciding to go head first, face up, curling my back down into the soft riverbed, praying, shoulders through, back through, bottom through, legs, feet, through. The river immediately floated my legs away, and I had to grab the wire to avoid going with the current. I came up into the air gasping, clinging on. I edged along the curtain and managed to scramble round the boathouse wall and up out of the water onto the grassy bank. I stood up with knees that felt like buckling and tried to open the door into the dock. It was immovable. I could drive Harry's car to the nearest house. Big snag. Harry's car had gone. Before I did anything, I thought I needed to put on my boots. Went into the boathouse through the top door. No boots. No ski suit jacket either. I ran along the stony path to Sam's large shed in my socks and found that I could get inside. No lock on the door. The centre was occupied by a large boat on blocks, its superstructure covered with lightweight grey plastic sheeting. Among the junk, I found a tyre lever and a heavy mallet. With those, I returned at speed to the boathouse and attacked the lower door. The old wood of the frame gave up the struggle and splintered. I pulled the door open and stepped down into the boathouse. The shocking chill of the water, again a teeth-gritter. I waded along to Harry, who was sagging back against the corner. I bent down and turned him until I had my hands under his arms, his back towards me, and I dragged him along in the water to the door, and then pulled him out onto the grass. "God, Harry, what do you weigh?" I asked. "None of your bloody business," he mumbled. I half laughed, relieved. If he could say that, he wasn't in a dying frame of mind. I left him and jogged off in my socks to find a telephone. I went with Harry in the ambulance to Maidenhead Hospital, both of us swathed in blankets. Then it was a matter of phoning Fiona and waiting to see the extent of Harry's injuries, which proved to be a pierced calf, entry and exit wounds both clean and clotted, with no dreadful damage in between. While Fiona was still on her way, the medics stuffed Harry full of antibiotics and other palliatives and put stitches where they were needed. "But why," she asked, half crossed, half mystified, "did he go to Sam's boatyard in the first place?" Before I could tell her, a nurse came to fetch her to see Harry, and when she returned half an hour later, she looked dazed. "Harry's sleepy," she said. "He kept waking up and telling me silly things. I can't make head or tail of it." "I'll tell you on the way home. Would you like me to drive?" As we headed for Shackleton in the early dark, I told her the gist of what had befallen us. I pulled up outside Tmaine's house, and she said she would come in for a while. Tmaine, Mackie, and Perkin were all in the family room. "I think someone tried to kill Harry," Fiona said starkly. Tmaine said, "What?" She told it to them much as I'd told her myself. "If John hadn't been with him to help—" Tmaine said, "My dearest girl, it must have been the most dreadful accident. Whoever would want to kill Harry?" They spent time reassuring Fiona until the worst of the worry unwound from her body, and I made no attempt to cast doubts, because it would have achieved nothing good. With Dune, early the next afternoon, it was a different matter. He came into the dining room where I was working and sat down opposite me. "I hear you're a proper little hero," he said dryly. "Who says so?" "Mr. Goodhaven." I stared back, blandly, with the same expression that he was trying on me. "Accident or attempted murder?" Dune asked. "The latter, I'd say. Have you found his car?" "Not yet," he frowned. "Where would you search for it?" he asked. I said, "At the top of a cliff." He blinked. "Maybe a metaphorical cliff." "Go on, then." "What would you have thought if Harry Goodhaven had disappeared forever yesterday afternoon, and you'd found his car later by a cliff, real or metaphorical?" "Suicide," he said promptly. "An admission of guilt." "End of investigation? Books closed?" He stared at me somberly. "There would also be the possibility of simple flight. We would look for him round the world. The books would remain open." "But you wouldn't investigate anyone else, because you would definitely consider him guilty of Angela Brickle's killing." "Well, the evidence points to it. His flight or suicide would confirm it." "But something about that original evidence bothers you." "Why do you say so?" he asked. "Because you didn't arrest him." "Go on," he said neutrally. "Suppose someone couldn't understand why you didn't arrest Harry, and decided to remove any doubts you might be showing." He sat for a while without speaking. "Whoever took Harry's car," I said, "removed my jacket and boots as well." "Why didn't you tell me that?" "I'm telling you now." I paused. "I say there wasn't supposed to be any reason to think Harry had gone to Sam's boatyard. No one would ever have looked for him there. I'd say it was an attempt to confirm Harry's guilt that went disastrously wrong." He said, "I would like you to be at the boatyard tomorrow morning. Mr. Jaeger is meeting me there at 9 a.m. Tmaine lent me his Volvo in the morning, reminding me before I set off that it was the day of an awards dinner at which he was to be honoured. I was invited. Sam and Dune were already in the boatyard by the time I'd found my way there, neither of them radiating joy. "Right, sir," Dune said as I stood up out of the car. "Please take us through your actions of Wednesday afternoon." I pushed open the door, and we looked at the hole in the floor. "We walked in," I said, "just talking." "What about?" Dune asked. "About a party Sam gave here. Harry saw an envelope on the floor, and when he bent to pick it up, the floor cracked and gave way." Sam looked blank. I said, "I took off my boots and jacket and left them up here, and I dropped into the water." "Yes," Dune said. "You can see better from the lower door," I remarked, turning and going down the path. Sam disgustedly fingered the splintered door frame. "Did you do this?" he demanded. "It wasn't locked." "It was," I said, "with no key in sight." "Well, the key was in the keyhole on the inside." "Absolutely not," I said. Sam pulled the door open, and we looked into the scene that was all too familiar to my eyes. Muddy water, the hole in the ceiling overhead, and the curtain of iron mesh across the exit to the river. "There's a sort of walkway along this right-hand wall," I told Dune. "You can't see it now because of the flood water." Sam nodded. "A mooring dock." Dune said, "Mr. Kendall, you came through the hole, found Mr. Goodhaven and brought him to the surface. You sat him on the dock, then dived out under the curtain and climbed onto the bank. Is that right?" Yes, and while I was pulling Harry along to that far corner, someone opened the main door above our heads, like I told you, and then went away without saying anything. And I heard a car drive off, which might have been Harry's. Well, why didn't you call out for help? Harry had been enticed here. It all felt like a trap. After a short silence, Dune said, "You're out on the bank, what next?" I saw the car had gone. I went to collect my boots and jacket, but they'd gone too. I got Harry out here and then found a phone. A thought struck me. I turned to Sam. "What happens to the rubbish lying in the dock when you roll up the curtain?" "What are you talking about?" Dune asked. "Harry's leg was impaled on something," I said mildly. "He was stuck under water. He'd have been dead in a very few minutes." Next time Sam rolled the curtain up, Harry would have drifted quietly out of here, I should think, and no one would ever have known he'd been here. I paused and asked Sam, "How soon would you have rolled up the curtain?" He answered at once, "Whenever I'd found the hole in the floor. I'd have gone to take a look from beneath like we're going to now." "What's under the water in the dock?" I asked him. "Huh?" "What did Harry get stuck on?" "Well, I haven't a clue." "If you raise the curtain," I said, "we may never know." "Ah," Dune stared judiciously at Sam. "It's a matter for grappling irons, then. Can we get a light inside here?" "The main switch for here's over in the shed," Sam said. He walked out and along the path to his workshop. "This could have been an accident, sir," Dune said uneasily. I nodded. "A good trap never looks like one." "Are you quoting someone?" "Yes, me. I've written a good deal about traps, how to set them, how to catch game. The books are lying about all over the place in Shackleton. Everyone's dipped into them. Follow the instructions and kill your man." "I'll have to see those books." Sam came back and pressed 3 switches. The lights in the ceiling came on and illuminated the ancient brick walls and the weathered old grey beams which crossed from side to side, holding up the planks of the floor above. Holding up the planks except where the hole was. "There's a bit of beam missing," I said. Sam nodded. "Looks like it, but I didn't know about it. How could I?" Dune said, "You yourself, sir, have all the knowledge and the tools for tampering with your boathouse." "I didn't." Sam's response was belligerence, not fear. "Everyone knows this place. Everyone's been here. Anyone could cut out a beam that small. It's child's play." "Who, precisely?" Dune asked. "Besides you?" "Well, most people can use a saw, can't they?" Dune said, "I'll take another look upstairs now, if you please, sir." The floor was solid except for the one strip over the missing bit of beam. The floorboards themselves were grey with age and dusty, but not worm-eaten, not rotten. I went down on my knees and edged towards the hole. The way the floorboards had been laid, I saw, had meant that the doctored beam had been a main load-bearer. Several of the planks, including those that had given way under Harry's weight, had without that beam support simply been hanging out in space, resting like a seesaw over the previous beam, but otherwise supported only by the tight fit of each plank against the next. The floorboards hadn't snapped, as I'd originally thought. They'd gone down into the dock with Harry. I tested a few planks carefully with the weight of my hand, then retreated and stood up on safer ground. "Well," Dune said, "it's still lethal just each side of the hole." "Right." He turned to Sam. "What races did you ride in on Wednesday afternoon?" Dune asked. "At Ascot." "What races?" "Yes." 2-mile hurdle, novice chase." Dune pulled out a notebook and wrote down the reply as given, checking that he'd got it right. Sam, upon whom understanding had dawned, said, I wasn't here driving Harry's frigging car away, if that's what you're thinking." "I'll need to ascertain a good many people's whereabouts on Wednesday afternoon," Dune said placidly. "But that's all for now, gentlemen." Sam came with me to where I'd parked Tmaine's car on stone-strewn grass. "Do you think I set that trap?" "You certainly could have." "Oh, sure," he said. "Dead easy, but I didn't." He looked up into my face. "Unless you killed Angela Brickell," I said, "you wouldn't have tried to kill Harry. Wouldn't make sense." "I didn't do the silly little bimbo any harm." He shook his head. "She was too intense for me, if you want to know, always going on about mortal sin. She wanted me to marry her." His voice full of the enormity of such a thought. The moody Miss Brickell suddenly became a real person, not a pathetic collection of dry bones. A mixed-up young woman full of strong urges and stronger guilts, who'd piled too much pressure onto someone who couldn't bear it all, and who'd seen a violent way out. Someone who knew how easily Olympia had died from hands round the neck. "What did she look like?" I said.
Not bad, he said. Brown hair, thin figure, small tits, round bottom. She wasn't much fun, old Angie, but good on a mattress. What an epitaph, I thought. Chisel it in stone. Even after having done the week's shopping en route, I was back at Shackleton House in good time for Tmaine to drive his Volvo to Newbury races. He had sent 3 runners off in the horse box and was taking Mackie to assist, leaving me to my first chapter in the dining room. When they'd gone, Dee Dee came in to drink coffee over the sorted clippings. I said, "I hope Tmaine won't mind my taking all these with me when I go home." "Home?" Dee Dee smiled. "He doesn't want you to go home. He wants you to write the whole book here." She took a mouthful of coffee. "He wants you for Gareth, I think." Fiona telephoned during the afternoon to say that she'd brought Harry home and he wanted to see me, so I abandoned the empty page and walked down to the village. Fiona hugged me and led me into the pink and green chintzy sitting room where Harry, pale with blue shadows below the eyes, sat in an armchair with his bandaged leg elevated on a large upholstered footstool. "Hello," he said, raising a phantom smile. "How's the leg?" I asked. "Lousy. Weighs a couple of tons. Still, no gangrene as yet." After a moment he said, "I want to ask a favour." "Go on." "Take Cinderella to the ball," he said. "What?" "Fiona, to Tramaine's party. You're going, aren't you?" I nodded. "I'm not leaving you," Fiona protested. "Of course you are, love. It wouldn't be the same for Tmaine if you weren't there. He dotes on you. John can take you. And," his eyes brightened mischievously with reawakening energy, "I know who'd love to use my ticket." "Who?" his wife demanded. "Erica, my sainted aunt." The Lifetime Award to Tmaine was the work of a hotel chain aiming to crash the racing scene with sponsorship in a big way. They, Castle Houses, had put up the prize for a steeplechase and had also taken over a prestigious handicap hurdle race in the Newbury programme for Saturday. As a preliminary to their blockbuster, Castle Houses had arranged the award dinner, which was being held on the racecourse in the grandstand. Before we went, we met in the family room, Tmaine pretending nonchalance and looking unexpectedly sophisticated in his dinner jacket, bulky body slimmed by expert tailoring. Perkin's jacket, by contrast, looked a shade too small for him. Gareth made a bravado entrance in a dinner jacket no one knew he had. "Where did you get that?" his father asked. He smiled widely. "Well, actually, Sam said I was the same height as him now, and he happened to have 2, so he lent it to me." "It's great," Mackie said warmly, herself shapely in a shimmering black dress edged with velvet. "And John's jacket, I see, survived the plunge into the ditch." "Don't get plastered tonight, John," Tmaine said. "I've a job for you in the morning." "Tell me more," I said. Tmaine, happy with life, said, "You feel confident riding Drifter now, don't you?" "More or less," I agreed. "Tomorrow you can ride Fringe. I own a half share in him. He's that 5-year-old in the corner box. You can school him over hurdles. Second lot." "If you say so," I said. "You stay here a bit longer," Tmaine said. "I don't see why you shouldn't have a rider in an amateur race, if you put your mind to it." "Cool," Gareth said fervently. Fiona drove her own car, the twin of Harry's still lost, and settled Erica Upton in the front beside her when we collected her. The 5-star novelist remarked that she'd had a long chat with Harry that afternoon on the telephone. "He told me to lay off you as you'd saved his life," she announced. "A proper spoil-sport." I said, "I don't suppose you'll take any notice." The whole racing world seemed to have embraced the occasion, for which, after the last race that afternoon, there had been much speedy unrolling of glittering black and silver ceiling-to-floor curtaining, transforming the workaday interior of the grandstand into something ephemerally magnificent. Fiona looked at the seating plan and said to meet at table 6. People came and surrounded her and Erica, and I drifted away from them and around, seeing a few people I knew by sight, and hundreds I didn't. Sam Yeager had come in a white dinner jacket. He also had a frilled white shirt, a black shoestring tie, and a definite air of strain under the confident exterior. Dune, it appeared, had more or less accused him straight out of sabotaging his own boathouse. "He listens to you," Sam said. "Can't you tell him I didn't do it?" I could try. "And he whistled up his cohorts after you'd gone," Sam went on. "And they came with wetsuits and grappling irons and dredged up a lot of muck from the dock. An old bicycle frame, some rusted railings, an old metal gate. He thinks I put it all in the water, hoping Harry would get tangled in it." Which he did. Nolan Everard joined us, glowering at Sam before switching his ill humour to me. "I don't want you treading on my effing toes," he said. "Why don't you clear off out of Shackleton?" "I will in a while. I told Tmaine there'll be trouble if he gives you any of my rides." "Ah." Glasses in hand, the chattering groups mixed and mingled, broke and reformed. Tmaine received genuinely warm congratulations with modesty, and Gareth said with gratification, "He deserves it, doesn't he?" "He does." "Makes you think a bit." "What about?" "About how my old dad's a superstar." He snaked off, and within minutes the throng began moving towards dinner. At table number 6 I found myself placed between Mackie and Erica Upton, and not even once was the formidable authoress anything but cordial, for which I was grateful to Harry. After dinner, speeches. Cultured gents, identified for me by Mackie as being the top brass of the Jockey Club, paid compliments to Tmaine from an adjacent table and bowed low to the sponsor. The sponsor then eulogized Tmaine, and a minion brought forth the award, a silver bowl rimmed by a circle of small galloping horses, an award actually worthy of the occasion. Tmaine was pink with gratification. He accepted the bowl. Everyone cheered, cameras flashed. Tmaine made a brief speech, thanks to the sponsors, to his friends, his staff, his jockeys, to racing itself. He sat down, overcome. Everyone cheered again. The music began. People moved about, flocking round Tmaine, patting his back. Perkin took Mackie to shuffle on the square of dance floor adjoining the table. Nolan took Fiona. Gareth vanished. "Do you dance?" I asked Erica. "No." She looked round, then said quietly, "Someone tried to kill Harry. That's extremely disturbing. Don't you think so?" "I do," I said, "especially as it was premeditated. Angela Brickle's death may or may not have been, but the attack on Harry was vastly thought out." She thought about it. "My God," I said, stunned. "What? What have you thought of?" "Wood floats." She looked bemused. "Well, of course it does." "The floorboards that went down to the water with Harry, they stayed under. They didn't float." "Why not?" "Have to find out," I said. She began to say something, but never completed it. There was a crash and a scream, and bizarrely against the unrelentingly cheerful music, 2 figures could be seen fighting among the dancers, Sam and Nolan. Sam had blood on his white jacket and down the white ruffles. Nolan's shirt was ripped open, showing a lot of hairy chest. They were both exchanging blows not 10 feet from table 6, and I stood up. Perkin tried to pull them apart and got smartly knocked down by Nolan, quick and tough with his fists as with his riding. I stepped onto the polished square and tried words instead. "Stupid fools," I said. Not the most inventive sentence ever. Nolan lashed out expertly at my face and whirled back to his prime target in time to parry Sam's wild lunge and kick him purposefully between the legs. Sam's head came forward. Nolan's fist began a descent onto the back of Sam's neck. I barged into Nolan, pushing him offline. He turned a face of mean-eyed fury in my direction. I was vaguely aware that the dance floor had cleared like morning mist, and also acutely conscious that Nolan knew volumes more about bare-knuckle fisticuffs than I did. As the music ground to a halt, Lewis's voice could be heard drawling, 5-4 the field. Everyone laughed. Everyone, except Nolan. In a straight fight, I wasn't going to beat him. All I would be was a punchbag, the object he saw as a threat to his dominance in Tmaine's stable, the interloper, the usurper, a legitimate target. I turned my back on him and took a step or 2 away. All I knew about fighting was ruse and trickery. When I felt the air behind me move and heard the brush of his clothes, I went down fast on one knee and whirled and punched upward hard into the bottom of his rib cage, and then shifted my weight into his body and upward so as to lift him wholesale off the floor, and before he'd got that sorted out I had one of his wrists in my hand, and he ended up on his feet with me behind him, his arm in a lock and my mouth by his ear. "You stupid shit," I said intensely. "The Jockey Club are here. Don't you care about your permit?" For answer, he kicked back and caught me on a shin. "If you lose it, I'll ride all your horses," I said unwisely. I gave him a hard shove and watched a dozen restraining hands clutch and keep him from destroying himself entirely. He struggled, and turned his vindictive face my way and shouted, "I'll kill you!" I listened to those words and thought of Harry. The racing crowd, entertaining skirmish over, drifted away and got the band restarted. Nolan was nowhere in sight. Sam took off his stained jacket and wiped his bloody nose. "I bumped into him, that's all I did," he proclaimed, "and the next thing he was bopping me one on the nose, so naturally I gave him one back." "Let's go home," Tmaine said abruptly. He stood, kissed Fiona, picked up the box containing his silver bowl, and waited for obedience from his sons, his daughter-in-law, and his prospective biographer. We stood. We followed him meekly. He made a stately, somewhat forbidding exit, his displeasure plainly visible to all. Fringe was younger, whippier, and less predictable than Drifter. "Take him down below the 3 flights of hurdles," Tmaine said, "then bring him up over them at a useful pace. Bob Watson will be with you for company. Fringe jumps well enough." I nodded. "Off you go, then." I'd ridden over many jumps before, but never on a racehorse, never fast. Bob was circling on his own horse, waiting for me. "Governor says you're to set off on the side nearest him," Bob said briefly. "He wants to see what you're doing." I nodded, slightly dry-mouthed. Bob expertly trotted his mount into position, gave me a raised-eye query about readiness, and kicked into a gallop. Fringe took up his position alongside. First hurdle ahead, judge the distance, give Fringe the message to shorten his stride. He got too near to the hurdle, hopped over it nearly to standstill, lost lengths on Bob. Damn, I thought. Second hurdle, managed it a bit better, gave him the signal 3 strides from the jump, felt him lift off at the right time. Third hurdle, I left him too much to his own devices as the distance was awkward. We floundered over it untidily, his hooves wrapping the wooden frames, my weight too far forward. A mess. We pulled up at the end of the schooling stretch and trotted back to where Tmaine stood with his binoculars. I didn't look at Bob, didn't want to see his disapproval, all too wretchedly aware that I hadn't done very well. Tmaine said, "Second pop, Bob, off you go," and I gathered we were to go back to the beginning and start again. I seemed to have more time to get things together the second time, and Fringe stayed beside Bob fairly smoothly to the end. I felt exalted. Tmaine said nothing until we were driving back to the stable, and then all he did was ask me if I were happy with what I'd done. "I'll learn," I said. When we reached the house, he brought a paper into the dining room, plonked it on the table, and instructed me to sign. It was, I saw, an application for a permit to race as an amateur jockey. I signed it. Tmaine grunted and bore the document away, coming back presently to say I should stop working and go with him to Newbury races if I didn't mind. Mackie would be coming with us, and we'd be picking up Fiona. I went into the office to put through a call to Dune's police station. He was off duty, I was told. I left my name. "Ask him," I said, "why the floorboards in the boathouse didn't float." Would you repeat that, sir?" I repeated it and got it read back. "That's right," I confirmed. "Don't forget it." We went to the races and watched Nolan ride Fiona's horse, Groundsel, and get beaten by a length into second place, and we watched Sam ride 2 of Tremaine's runners unprofitably, and then win for another trainer. Fiona told us on the way to the races that the police had phoned Harry to say they'd found his car in the station car park at Reading. They said it looks okay, but they've towed it off somewhere to search for clues. It seemed that both Sam and Nolan knew the details of Fringe's schooling. Sam said, "Well, you'll be taking my sodding job next," without meaning it in the least, and Nolan, bitter-eyed and cursing, saw Tremaine's warning glare and subsided with festering rancour. "How on earth do they know?" I asked, mystified. "Sam phoned Bob to find out," Tmaine said succinctly. "Bob told him he did all right. Sam couldn't wait to tell Nolan. I heard him. Bloody pair of fools." The next day, Sunday, Gareth held me to my promise to take him and Coconut out on another survival trip. The weather was much better, sunny but cold, still with a trace of breeze. We borrowed the Land Rover. "Where are you going?" Tmaine asked. "Along the road towards Reading," I said. "There's some great woodland there, unfenced, no sign saying keep out." Tmaine nodded. "Oh, I know what you mean. It's all part of the Quiller's Edge estate." We set off at 10, collected Coconut, and bowled along to the woods. There were parking places all along the road. I pulled into one of them, put on the handbrake, and when the boys were out, locked the door. Gareth sported his psychedelic jacket, Coconut, so called because of a wiry tuft of brown hair sticking straight up from the top of his head, wore an equally blinding anorak. I, in the absence of my ski-suit jacket, was dressed in jeans and an olive-drab barber borrowed from Tmaine. "Right," I said, smiling as they slid the straps of bright blue nylon knapsacks over their shoulders. "We'll take a walk into the Berkshire wilderness. Everyone fit?" We stepped straight into the tangled maze of alder, hazel, birch, oak, pine, fir and laurel, scrub woodland as nature had made it. The real thing as far as the boys were concerned. We went about a mile before they tired, and I didn't mean to go much further in any case, because according to the map I had in my pocket, we were by then in about the centre of the western spur of the Quiller's Edge woods. A little further on, the ground fell away abruptly, according to the map's contour lines. It would have meant too hard a climb on the return. So we made camp, and spent the morning identifying trees and flowers, particularly the ones which, in an emergency, could keep a person alive. Gareth had brought his camera, and took photos of everything possible. Then we prepared lunch, and I got the distinct impression that the boys were hooked on pizza, rather than nettle soup and grilled worm. We ended lunch with some chocolate. Gareth said casually, "Was it in a place like this that someone killed Angela Brickell?" "Well, I should think so, but 5 miles or so from here," I said. "She wanted to kiss me," he said with a squirm. Both Coconut and I looked at him in astonishment. "I'm not as ugly as all that," he said, offended. "You're not ugly," I assured him positively, "but you're young." "But she said I was growing up." "When did she say that?" I asked mildly. "In the Easter holidays last year. She was always out there in the yard, always looking at me." He swallowed. "Then she went away, and I was really glad." "Glad?" I queried. "Relieved," he said finally. "I was afraid of her." After lunch I showed them the basics of map reading. Then we played an intense game involving tracking each other without being spotted, and I think they enjoyed it. "Right," I said eventually. "Which way back to the Land Rover?" "That way," said Gareth immediately, pointing east. "That way," Coconut said, pointing west. "Which way is north?" I asked. They both got it wrong, and I showed them how to use a watch as a compass. "Point the hour hand at the sun, then halfway between the hand and 12 o'clock is the north-south line." Coconut looked at his watch and around him. "That way is north," he said, pointing. "But which way is the Land Rover?" "If you go north, you'll come to the road," I said. "What do you mean, you?" Gareth demanded. "I thought," I said, "that it would be more fun for you to find your own way back. And," I went on, "so as you don't get lost if the sun goes in, you can paint the trees as you go with luminous paint. Then you can always come back to me." "Cool," he said. "I'll follow you," I said, "but you won't see me. If you go really badly wrong, I'll tell you. Otherwise, survival's up to you." I unzipped the pouch round my waist and gave him the small jar of paint and the sawn-off paintbrush. "Don't forget to paint so you can see the splash from both directions, coming and going, and don't get out of sight of your last splash." "Okay." "Wait for me when you hit the road." "Yes." They consulted their watches and moved north through the trees, looking back and painting as they went. For some time I could see their bright jackets in the dappled shade of the afternoon sun. Then, when they had gone, I began slowly to follow their splashes. When I saw them again, I dropped down on one knee, knowing that they wouldn't see me at that low level in my nature-coloured clothes. Besides the map, I'd brought along my faithful compass, and by its reckoning checked the boys' direction all the time. They wandered off to the northeast a bit, but not badly enough to get really lost, and after a while made a correction to drift back to north. The pale cream splashes were easy to spot, never far apart. It was a slow-going mile, but towards the end one could hear occasional cars along the road ahead, and eventually Gareth and Coconut, with whoops, crashed through the last few yards. I speeded up and stepped out behind them, much to Gareth's surprise. "We thought you were miles back," he exclaimed. "You laid an excellent trail. The paint's nearly finished." He held it up to show me, and the jar slipped out of his hand, spilling the remains of its contents onto the earth. "Hey, sorry," he said, "but there wasn't much left." "Doesn't matter," I picked up the jar. "Can we get some more?" Coconut asked. "Sure, no problem." "Ready to go home?" Whether they wanted to or not, Tmaine, Mackie and Perkin received a minute-by-minute account of the whole day, with the sole exception of the discussion about Angela Brickell. Tmaine listened with veiled approval, Mackie with active interest, Perkin with boredom. "It's a real wilderness," Gareth said. "You can't hear anything, and I took lashings of photos." He stopped, suddenly frowning.
Hold on a minute." He sped out of the room and came back with his blue knapsack, searching the contents worriedly. "My camera's not here."
"Well, the one I gave you for Christmas?" Tmaine asked.
Gareth looked horrified. "We have to go back at once."
"No, you certainly won't," Tmaine said. "It'll be getting dark soon."
"But the trail we left, it's luminous paint," Gareth begged. "That's the whole point. You can see it in the dark."
"No," said his father.
"Well, did you drop it on the way back?" Mackie asked. "No." He thought about it. "I must have left it where we had lunch. I hung it on a branch." He was upset enough for me to say, "I'll get it tomorrow afternoon." "Will you?" Disaster swung back to hope. "Oh, great." He thought of something. "Isn't it lucky I dropped all the paint, because now you can see where the trail starts, because we didn't paint any trees once we could see the road." "Do explain," Mackie said. Gareth explained. "Will you really find the trail?" Mackie asked me, shaking her head.
"As long as someone hasn't parked on the patch of paint and taken it all away on their tyres."
"Oh, no," Gareth said, anguished.
"Don't worry," I told him. "I'll find your camera."
On Monday morning, first lot, I was back on Drifter.
"He's entered in a race at Worcester the day after tomorrow," Tmaine said as we walked out to the yard at 7 in the half-dawn. "Today's his last training gallop before that, so don't fall off."
"I'll try not to."
Will you ride second lot as well today?"
"Delighted."
"And thanks for giving Gareth such a good day yesterday."
"I enjoyed it."
We went up to the Downs, and at least I stayed in the saddle, and felt indeed a new sense of being at home there, of being at ease. When I went in for breakfast, I found Mackie and Sam Yeager sitting at the table with Tmaine, all of them discussing that day's racing at Nottingham. The horse that Tmaine had been going to run had gone lame, and Sam's other ride had been withdrawn because its owner's wife had died. "Reckon I'll work on the boat," he grinned at me. "I hear you played cowboys and Indians all over Berkshire with Gareth and Coconut yesterday." "News travels," I said resignedly. "Dune spent all Saturday afternoon at the boatyard," he went on. "He got a message from you, it seems."
I did send one."
"Dune phoned me yesterday to say he'd been at the boatyard and taken away some objects for which he'd give me a receipt."
"What objects?" asked Tmaine.
"He wouldn't say."
"What was the message?" Mackie asked me. I said, "I asked him why the floorboards didn't float."
After second lot, Sam and I followed Tmaine from the yard to the house. We found Dune waiting for us, sitting in his car. The detective chief inspector emerged like a turtle from his shell when he saw us arrive, and he'd come alone for once. "Which of us do you want?" Tmaine inquired. "All of you, sir, if you don't mind." "You'd better come in then." Dune followed us into the kitchen, and I made a mug of instant coffee for each of us. Mackie came through, and I made her some coffee. Dune picked a piece of paper out of his breast pocket and handed it to Sam. "A receipt, sir," he said, "for 3 lengths of floorboard retrieved from the dock in your boathouse." "Why didn't they float?" Tmaine asked bluntly. "They didn't float, sir, because they were weighted." "With what?" Sam asked. "With pieces of paving stone. There are similar pieces of paving stone scattered on a portion of your boatyard property." Dune went out of his car and returned carrying a 5-foot plank, which he laid across the kitchen table. Toward one end, on the surface that was now uppermost on the table, rested a long, unevenly shaped, darkish slab of what I might have thought was rough-faced granite. "Paving stone," Sam said, glancing at it. "That's marble." "It's stuck on," Dune said. "Yeah," Sam said. "Superglue, we think," Dune said. "A lot of plastic adhesives would be strong enough," Sam said, nodding. "And how do you happen to have chunks of marble lying about?" Dune asked. "It came with a job lot of stuff I bought from a demolition firm," Sam explained. Dune asked conversationally, "Did you stick marble onto the floorboard, sir?" "No, I did not," Sam said explosively. "Onto the underside of the floorboards," I said. There were no slabs of marble in sight when Harry and I went into the upstairs room of the boathouse. "Have you finished snooping round my place now?" Sam demanded. "I want to work on my boat." "Go ahead, sir. Never mind my men if they're there." "Right." Sam went out to his car and tooted as he drove away. "I'd like to talk to Mr. Kendall alone," Dune said placidly. Tmaine suggested I took Dune into the dining room. He followed me docilely, bringing the plank. "Do you know who did it?" he asked. "No," I said truthfully. "You must have opinions." "They're negative more than positive." "Often just as valuable."
"I'd assumed the trap-setter had been a guest at Sam Yeager's boatyard party," I said. "And," I went on, "I'd assume it was the person who killed Angela Brickell. Whoever that was wanted to fix the blame forever on Harry by making him disappear." "Why do you think Angela was killed?" he asked. "I'd guess to keep a secret. I mean, suppose she was pregnant. Suppose she went out into the wilds with him, and they were going to make love, or they'd done it, and she said, 'I'm pregnant, you're the father, what are you going to do about it?'" I paused. "I'd think perhaps she was killed because she wanted too much, and because she wouldn't have an abortion." "All right," he said. "Method, strangulation, which was all the rage around here." Perkin, in his overalls, appeared in the open doorway, hovering. "Is Mackie over here?" he said. I can't find her." "In the kitchen with Tmaine," I said. "Thanks." He swept a gaze over Dune and the plank and said with irony, "Sorting it out, then?" Dune said a shade heavily, "Mr. Kendall's always helpful," and Perkin went off. After a moment, Dune said, "About those guidebooks of yours. I'd like to see them." They were in the family room. I went to fetch them and returned with the only 3 I'd found: Jungle, Safari, and Ice. The others, I explained, could be anywhere, as everyone had been reading them. He opened Jungle and quickly flipped through the opening chapters. "Never get exhausted," Dune said aloud. "What sort of advice is that?" "Exhausted people can't be bothered to stick to life-saving routines." Dune read out, "Fishing, hunting, trapping." He flicked the pages. "In the jungle, hang fish hooks to catch birds. Don't forget bait. You always need bait." He looked up. "That envelope was bait, wasn't it?" I nodded. Good bait." "We haven't found it. The water's like liquid mud." Eyes down again to the book, he went on. "Spears and arrows can be hardened to increase their powers of penetration by being charred lightly in hot embers, a process which tightens and toughens the wood fibres." Dune stopped reading and remarked, "You don't say anything about sharpening old bicycle frames and railings." "There aren't many bicycle frames in the jungle." Were they sharpened?" He sighed. "Not artificially." He laid the book aside. "Well, sir," he said, "we can trace the path of ideas about a trap, but who do you think put them into practice?" I worked on and off on Tmaine's book for the rest of the morning. Dee drifted in and out, offering coffee and company, and Tmaine put his head in to say he was going to Oxford to see his tailor and to ask if I wanted an opportunity to shop. I thanked him and declined. Mackie came through from her side to keep company with Dee, saying Perkin had gone to Newbury to collect some supplies, and presently the 2 women went off to lunch together. I went upstairs, showered and changed out of riding clothes into the more comfortable jeans and shirt I'd worn the day before, and pulled on sneakers and the red sweater for warmth. After that I went down to the kitchen and made a cheese sandwich for lunch. I wandered into the family room. Gareth's back for grub message was still pinned to the corkboard, and I remembered I'd said that I would go back for his camera. I found a piece of paper and left my own message. I borrowed the Land Rover to fetch Gareth's camera, back for cooking the grub. I went upstairs again to change back into jodhpur boots to deal with the terrain, and to pick up the map and the compass in case I couldn't find the trail. I drove to the Quiller's Edge estate until I thought I'd come more or less to where Gareth had dropped the paint, parked there and searched. The splash was dusty but still visible, and without much trouble I found the beginning of the trail about 20 feet straight ahead in the wood, and followed it easily. The trail eventually reached the small clearing. Almost at once I spotted Gareth's camera, prominently hanging, as he'd said, from a branch. I walked across to collect it, and something hit me very hard indeed in the back. I didn't know what had happened. I was falling. I was lying face down on the ground. There was something wrong with my breathing. I had heard nothing, seen nothing, but, I thought incredulously, someone had shot me. From total instinct as much from injury, I lay as dead. I shut my eyes. There was another jolting thud in my back. So this was death, I thought numbly. Breathing was terrible. My chest was on fire. A wave of clammy perspiration broke out on my skin. I lay unmoving. My face was on dead leaves and dried grass and pieces of twig. I could smell the musty earth. Someone, I thought dimly, was waiting to see if I moved. and if I moved, there would be a third thud, and my heart would stop. I lay still, not a twitch. I could hear no one moving, hadn't heard even the shots. Breathing was agony. Minimum air could go in, trickle out. Too little. In a while, I would go to sleep. After countless ages, I seemed to come back to a realization that I was continuing to breathe, even if with difficulty. However ghastly I might feel, however feeble, I wasn't drowning in blood. I wasn't coughing it up. My certainty that my attacker was still nearby began to fade. He wouldn't be there after all this time. He believed I was dead. He had gone. I moved my left arm. Christ, I thought that hurt. Hurt it might, but nothing else happened. No more thuds in the back, no final curtain. Perhaps I really was alone. I put both palms flat on the decaying undergrowth and tried to heave myself up onto my knees. Not only could I not do it, but the effort was so excruciating that I opened my mouth to scream and couldn't breathe enough for that either. I couldn't lift myself off the ground because I was stuck to it in some way. Cautiously, I wormed my right hand between my body and the earth and came to what seemed like a rod between the two. Slowly, trying to ration the pain into manageable portions, I slid my hand out again, and then after a while I felt round my back and came to the rod there also, and faced the grim certainty that someone had shot me not with a bullet, but an arrow. I had an arrow right through my body from back to front, somewhere in the region of my lower ribs, through my right lung, about level with my heart, but to one side. I'd been hit twice, I remembered. Maybe I had 2 arrows through me. 1 or 2, I was still alive. Survival begins in the mind. I'd written that and knew it to be true. But to survive an arrow a mile from a road with a killer around to make sure I didn't make it, where in one's mind did one search for the will to survive that? Get up, I told myself. Get up and get going. Which way? The trail seemed obvious enough that my intended killer had come and gone that way, must have done, and if he should return for any reason I wouldn't want to meet him. I had a compass in my pocket. The distant road lay almost due north of the clearing, and the straightest line to the road lay well to the left of the paint trail. I shut my mind to the consequences, positioned my hands, and pushed. The arrow tip came free, and I lay on my side, looking down at a sharp black point sticking out from scarlet wool. Black, the length of a finger, hard and sharp. I touched the needle tip of it and wished I hadn't. Only one arrow, only one all the way through at least. Not much blood. I retrieved the compass carefully from my pocket and took a bearing on north. North, it seemed, was where my feet were. I rolled with effort to my knees and felt desperately, appallingly, overwhelmingly ill. Sweating, I curled my left hand behind my back and felt for the other arrow and found it sticking out of my jersey. I took a stronger hold of it and it came away with a sharp dagger of pain. I reckoned it hadn't gone in further than a rib or my spine. I only had the first one to worry about. It would have been madness to pull it out, even if I could have faced doing it. With the arrow in place, bleeding was held at bay. I might die with it in. I'd die quicker with it out. Arrows. The guidebooks all gave instructions for making them. Illustrations thoughtfully provided. Still on my knees, I edged round to face north. The clearing was all mine. No man with a gun, no archer with a bow. I slowly shifted on my knees across the clearing, aiming to the left of the painted trail. I shuffled over to a sapling, then, hauling on branches, I stood up. Even my legs felt odd. I clung hard to a sapling with my eyes closed, waiting for things to get better. North. I opened my eyes and took the compass out of my jeans pocket. Holding on with one hand, I took a visual line ahead from the north needle to mark into memory the furthest small tree I could see, then put the compass away again, and with infinite slowness clawed away forward by inches, and after a while reached the target and held on to it for dear life. I had travelled perhaps 10 yards. I felt exhausted. In a while I consulted the compass, memorized another young tree, and made my way there. I went another 10 yards, and another. My breath began wheezing from the exertion. Pain had become a constant. Ignore it. Stopping again, I began to do a few unwelcome sums. I had travelled perhaps 50 yards. It seemed a marathon to me, but realistically it was roughly 1/35th of a mile, which left 34/35 still to go. According to my watch, it was already after 4 o'clock. Darkness lay ahead. I went another 50 yards. The sun sank lower on my left, and the blue shadows of dusk began gathering. 50 yards, rest. 50 yards, rest. 50 yards, rest. Think of nothing else. Dusk deepened until I could no longer see 10 yards ahead. I stopped and sank slowly down to my knees, resting my forehead and the front of my left shoulder against a young birch trunk, drained as I had never been before. I hovered on the edge of sleep. My weight shifted against the tree, slipping downward, and the shaft of the arrow hit the ground. The explosive pain of it brought me hellishly back to full consciousness. I sat for what seemed a long time in the cold darkness, and eventually there was a lightening of the shadows and a luminosity in the wood, and the moon rose clear and bright in the east. Time to go. I pulled out the compass, held it horizontally close to my eyes, let the needle settle onto north, looked that way, and mapped the first few feet in my mind. I pulled myself to my feet again, put one foot in front of the other. The only way home. I couldn't always see so far ahead by moonlight, and needed to consult the compass more often. It slowed things up to keep putting it in and out of my jeans pocket, so after a while I tucked it up the sleeve of my jersey. I stopped every 15 minutes for a rest. I plodded on methodically, taking continual bearings, breathing carefully, aiming performance just below capability so as to last out to the end. Slowly, slowly I went north. Then one time when I put my hand in my sleeve to bring out the compass, it wasn't there. I dropped it. I couldn't go on without it. I felt swamped with liquefying despair, weak enough for tears. Get a bloody grip on things, I told myself. Don't be stupid. Work it out. Elementary. Think. I looked upwards to the sky, and there, up there, glimpsed now and then between the moving boughs, was the constellation of the Great Bear and the Pole Star, the North Star. Elementary. No doubt from then on my route wasn't as straight or as accurate as earlier, but at least I was moving, clinging on to things, breathing little, inching a slow way forwards. I achieved again a sort of numbness. Light-headed, I dare say. I looked at my watch and found it was after 11 o'clock, which meant nothing really. All that I was really clear about was that I would go on as long as my lungs and muscles would function. The face of the archer. In splinters of thought, unconnectedly, I began to look back over the past 3 weeks. I thought of Angela Brickle's death, and of the attacks on Harry and me. Angela Brickle had probably been killed to close her mouth. Harry was to have died to establish his guilt. I wasn't to be allowed to find the truth for Dune. All guesses, I thought. The archer had to be someone who knew I was going to go back for Gareth's camera. It had to be someone who knew how to find the trail. It had to be someone who wanted me gone. One step and then another, wheezing at every breath. Endless night. The moon moved in silver stateliness across the sky behind me. Left foot, right foot, hold on to branches, breathe by fractions. Midnight. Grapevine round Shackleton, a mass of common knowledge, yet this time, I stopped. The archer had a face. Dune would have to juggle with alibis and charts, proving opportunity, searching for footprints. Dune would have to deal with a cunning mind in the best actor of them all. Perhaps I was wrong. I tortoised onwards. 1 o'clock. The moon, I thought briefly, had come down from the sky and was dancing about in the wood not far ahead. Rubbish, it couldn't be. It certainly was. I could see it shining. Lights! I came to sensible awareness, to incredulous understanding. Lights travelling along the road. I reached the last tree and leaned feebly against it, wondering what to do next. I felt dreadfully spent. I slid down onto my knees, leaning head and left shoulder against the bark. By my reckoning, the Land Rover was way along the road to the right. Car lights came round the bend from that direction. I tried waving an arm. The car braked suddenly, then backed rapidly until it was level with me. It was the Land Rover. Mackie, running, calling, "John, John," and reaching me and stopping dead and saying, "Oh, my God!" Perkin behind her looking down, his mouth shocked open in speechlessness. Gareth saying, "We've been looking for you for ages. You've got an arrow." His voice died. "Run and fetch Tmaine," Mackie said to Gareth, and he sprinted away. "Well, surely we must take that arrow out," Perkin said, and put his hand on the shaft and gave it a tug. I yelled. It came out as a croak only, but it was a yell in my mind. "Don't." Mackie's face came down to mine. "Don't move the arrow," I said with terrible urgency. "Don't let him." She stood up. "Don't touch it, Perkin. It's hurting him dreadfully." "It would hurt less out," he said obstinately. The vibrations from his hand travelled through me. "No. No." Mackie pulled at his arm in a panic. "You must leave it. You'll kill him. Darling, you must leave it alone." Finally he took his hand off the shaft. I wondered if he believed that it would kill me. A car pulled up behind the Land Rover and disgorged Gareth and then Tmaine. "Jesus Christ!" he said blankly. Then he took charge. "Right, I'll call an ambulance on the car phone. Keep still, we'll soon have you out of here." He sped away back to the car and we could hear his urgent voice. When he returned he said, "We've looked for you for hours. We telephoned the police and the hospitals and they had no news of a car crash or anything, so then we came out here." "Because of your message," Mackie said. "On the corkboard." "Oh, yes." Gareth's camera was swinging from Perkin's hand. Mackie saw me watching it and said, "We found the trail, you know." Gareth chimed in. "Perkin found it. He went all the way along it with a torch," Mackie said, stroking her husband's arm, "and he came back with Gareth's camera. We didn't know what to do next." "What happened exactly?" Tmaine asked. "Tell you later," I whispered. The ambulance arrived from the direction of Reading. Tmaine and Mackie went to meet the men in uniform. Gareth took a step or two after them, and I called him. "Gareth!" He stopped and came back. "Yes? What can I do?" "Stay with me," I said. He said, "Oh, okay," and stayed. After a pause, Perkin put his face down near mine and asked with perfect calmness, "Do you know who shot you?" I didn't reply. I looked for the first time straight into his moonlit eyes, and I saw Perkin the son, the husband, the one who worked with wood. I looked deep, but I couldn't see his soul. Saw the man who thought he'd killed me. Saw the archer. "Do you know?" he asked again. After a long moment, in which he read the answer for himself, I said, "Yes." He straightened and looked across to where the men from the ambulance were advancing with his father and his wife, looked at his brother a pace away, listening. He said to me, "I love Mackie very much." He'd said everything, really. I spent the night unaware of the needlework going on in my chest, and drifted back late in the morning to a mass of tubes and machines. It seemed I was going to live. The doctors were cheerful. By Wednesday I was breathing without mechanical help and drinking soup. The first person who came to see me was Tmaine. He looked many years older. He went over to the window, then he turned and said, "Something awful happened yesterday." "What?" I asked apprehensively. "Perkin." "Sit down," I said. He fumbled his way into the chair provided for visitors. "Perkin," he said, "you'd think you'd be careful." "What happened?" I asked when he stopped. "He was carving part of a cabinet by hand, and he cut his leg open with a knife. He bled. He tried to reach the door. There was blood all over the floor. Pints of it. It was an artery. Mackie found him. She's in a terrible state." Tears filled his eyes. "I have to go back now, but I wanted to tell you myself." "Yes. Thank you." Dune arrived very soon after Tmaine had gone. "Who shot you?" I didn't see. He sat in the visitor's chair and looked at me broodingly. "I saw Mr. Tremaine Vickers in the car park," he said.
I suppose he told you they're bad news.
Yes, dreadful for them.
He bent down and picked up a carrier that he'd lain on the floor. Thought you might like to see this. He drew out a sturdy, transparent plastic inner bag and held it up to the light to show me the contents. An arrow, cut into 2 pieces. One half was clean and pale, and the other stained and dark, with a long black section sharpened at the tip. "We've had our lab take a look at this," he said, "but they say there are no distinctive tool marks. It could have been sharpened by any straight blade in the kingdom."
"Oh," I said.
"But charring the point, now that's in your books, and in other books beside mine." He nodded. "An inch either way and you'd be history, so I hear. I told them all not to worry. I'd go on working with you as soon as you were conscious, and we would see our way together to a solution of the whole case." I grinned. "How are you getting on with the alibis?" "We're working on them, but everyone moved about so much."
When he'd gone, I lay and thought for a long time about poor Perkin.
Perkin was one of the very few people who'd known about the camera and the trail. I'd listened to Gareth tell him in detail on Sunday evening. On Monday morning, Dune turned up at Shackleton House with the plank. Perkin knew it was I who had remembered that the floorboard should have floated, and on Monday he'd seen the plank on the dining-room table and heard Dune and me talking in close private consultation. Maybe it was then that he began to panic, fearful that John Kendall would lead Dune to the quarry, who was himself. By lunchtime, Perkin had driven off, going to Newbury for supplies, he'd said. Going to the Quiller's Edge woods, more like. Tmaine had gone to Oxford to his tailor, Mackie was out to lunch with Dee Dee, Gareth was at school. I'd abandoned the empty house and walked joyfully into the woods, and only by chance did I know what had hit me. I thought about the search party and imagined Perkin threading his way along that trail at night, following the paint quite easily, as he'd been that way already in daylight, and satisfied with the course of events. That satisfaction would smartly have evaporated when he reached the clearing and found me gone. He had intended to go back to his family and appear utterly horrified while breaking the news of my death. Instead, he'd experienced genuine horror at finding I was still alive. If I'd tried to walk out along the trail, I would have met Perkin face to face. I shivered in the warm hospital room. Some things were better unimagined. For Perkin, making arrows would have been like filing his nails, and he'd had a stove right in his workroom for the charring. He must have constructed a pretty good strong bow, too, according to my detailed instructions, which would by now no doubt be broken in pieces in distant undergrowth. Perkin had resented Mackie's friendly feelings towards me, not strongly enough to kill me for that, but certainly strongly enough to make killing me satisfying in that respect also. Perkin had always been presumed to be busy in his workshop, and yet there were hours and days when he might not have been when Mackie was out of the house seeing to the horses. On the Wednesday of Harry's trap, Mackie had been saddling Tremaine's runner at Ascot. I thought of Angela Brickell, and of all the afternoons Perkin had spent alone in the house. She had tried to seduce even Gareth. Not hard to imagine she'd set her sights also on Perkin. Intelligent men in love with their wives weren't immune to blatantly offered temptations, sudden arousal, quick, casual gratification. End of episode. Except not the end of the episode if the result was conception. Not the end if the woman threatened to disclosure. Not the end if she could and would destroy the man's marriage. Say Angela Brickell had definitely been pregnant, say she was sure who the father was. Say she enticed him into the woods and became demanding in every way and heavily emotional, piling on pressure. Perkin had not long before seen Olympia lying dead at Nolan's feet. He'd heard over and over again how fast she died. The quick way out of all his troubles lay in his own 2 strong hands. Angela Brickell was carrying Perkin's child. Perkin loved Mackie, and all too probably couldn't face her knowing what he'd done. Irresistible solution, a fast death for Angela. Easy. Long before Dune came knocking on the door, Perkin could have decided, in case the girl's body were ever found, to say he didn't remember her. No one had thought it odd that he didn't. He was seldom seen with the horses. His one mistake had been to try to settle the mystery forever by making Harry disappear. I thought that Dune might not think of looking in Perkin's workroom for a match to the arrow's wood. Perkin hadn't had much time to hunt elsewhere for anything suitable. He would have used a common wood, not exotic, but all the same, there would be more of it to be found, perhaps even in the cabinet he was making of bleached oak.
Perkin would have known that a wood match could be made. He knew more about wood than anyone else. Dune, with his promise of instant detection once I woke up, must have been the end of hope for Perkin. He did love Mackie. His universe was lost. One way out remained. I thought of Tmaine, of Mackie, of her unborn child. Nothing could be gained by trying to prove what Perkin had done. At the inquest on Perkin a week later, the coroner found unhesitatingly for accident, and expressed sympathy with the family. Tmaine came to collect me from the hospital afterwards. "Has Dune found out yet who put that arrow through you?" he asked. "I don't think so," I said. "You don't know yourself?" "No." He drove for a while in silence. "You don't think," he said painfully, "I mean, it had to be someone who knew you would fetch Gareth's camera. I told Dune it was a kid playing Robin Hood. I'm afraid—" "Block it out," I said. "Some kid did it." He knew, I thought. He was no fool. He could have worked things out the same way I had, and he'd have had a hellish time believing it of his own son. "About my book," he said, hesitating. "I don't know that I want to go on with it." "I'm going to write it," I said positively. "It's going to be an affirmation of your life and your worth, just as was intended. It's all the more important now, for you especially, but for Gareth, for Mackie, and your new grandchild as well." He drove without speaking the rest of the way. Fiona and Harry were with Mackie and Gareth in the family room. Mackie looked pale. "Hi," Gareth said. "Hi yourself," Harry said. "How are you feeling?" And Fiona put her arms carefully round me. Mackie brought cups of tea for everyone. It was a month yesterday, I thought, that I came here. A month in the country. After a while I left the family room and wandered through the hall and on into the far side of the house, into Perkin's workroom. It smelled aromatically and only of wood. Tools lay neatly, as always. The glue pot was cold on the stove. A copy of Return Safe from the Wilderness lay on a workbench, and I picked it up idly and looked through it. Traps, bows and arrows, all the familiar ideas. I flipped the pages resignedly, and they fell open as if from use, at the diagram in the first aid section showing the pressure points for stopping arterial bleeding. I stared blankly at the carefully drawn and accurate illustration of exactly where the main arteries could be found, nearest the surface, in the arms and wrists, and in the legs. Dear God, I thought numbly, I taught him that too.